Hi guys, and welcome to History for Calm Nights. Tonight we wander into a narrow street in industrial Britain where the sky is the colour of damp ash and the air tastes faintly of coal. You stand at the edge of a town that hums even after sunset, brick chimneys rising like dark teeth against a fading glow. Windows blink with candlelight, somewhere iron clatters, somewhere else a baby cries and is gently hushed. You're about to step into a world where sleep is precious, fragile, and often shed. And you probably will not survive this without longing for your central heating and memory foam mattress. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what the local time is for you right now. Now dim the lights and let the smoke roll in. You walk forward. It is evening in the middle decades of the 19th century, and the industrial age has reshaped the land beneath your boots. A widely accepted historical reality is that by the mid-1800s, Britain had become the first fully industrialised nation, with cities like Manchester and Birmingham swelling at astonishing speed. That growth did not glide in gently. It arrived in coughing fits and hammer blows. Rows of terraced houses pressed shoulder to shoulder, built quickly to contain the human tide drawn by factory wages. You slip between them now, the bricks still warm from the day's trapped heat. The street is narrow. You could stretch your arms and nearly brush both sides. Above washing lines sag like tired smiles. The smell is layered. Coal smoke first sharp and sooty, then boiled cabbage from an open window, then the faint sweetness of bread from a corner bakery that never quite cools. Beneath it all is the damp scent of packed earth and horse droppings, because industry does not erase the older rhythms entirely, it simply crowds them. A factory whistle sounds in the distance, even though the main shift ended hours ago. The echo lingers. It is not just a sound, it is a ruler measuring your life. You feel it in your bones. Historians still argue whether the strict discipline of industrial time felt immediately oppressive to workers, or whether many embraced it as a path to steady wages and independence. As you stand here, you sense both truths in the same breath. There is pride in labour. There is also fatigue. You pass a doorway left ajar. Inside you glimpse a single room glowing with lamplight. A family sits around a rough wooden table. The father's shoulders are rounded, his shirt collar dark with the day's sweat. The mother's hands move automatically, darning a sock with thread so fine it nearly disappears. Two children lean against each other, their eyelids heavy. Their day began before sunrise. You will follow them soon enough. For now you linger outside and listen. The town does not fall silent the way a rural village might. Instead, it softens into a murmur. Carts rattle over cobbles. A dog barks, then another answers. Somewhere a woman laughs too loudly, a flash of defiance against exhaustion. You tilt your head and notice how the smoke drifts low, trapped by cool air. It settles on your coat. By morning, a thin film of soot will dust the windowsills inside to every home. A curious little detail from the era might make you blink. Some industrial households believed that keeping windows tightly shut at night was healthier, fearing that night air carried dangerous miasmas. This meant bedrooms could grow stale and thick, especially in crowded dwellings. You imagine lying in that air, heavy with breath and coal particles, and you feel the weight of it on your chest. You turn down another lane. The houses look nearly identical, built in hurried uniformity. Each door opens directly onto the street. No gardens, no wide front steps, just threshold after threshold. The repetition is almost hypnotic. You realise that these structures were not designed with comfort in mind. They were designed with urgency. Workers needed to live near mills and foundries. Proximity meant punctuality. Punctuality meant profit. Inside one house, a mother shakes out a straw mattress. You can hear the faint rustle through the thin wall. Straw is cheap and common. It must be replaced when it grows damp or infested. Tonight she spreads it carefully, patting it flat. Her movements are tender despite the roughness of the material. Sleep here is not about luxury, it is about restoration. You picture yourself stepping into that room. The ceiling is low, a single fireplace dominates one wall. Its glow is both comfort and hazard. A mainstream observation often noted by social historians is that open hearths and candles were constant fire risks in working-class districts. Entire rows of houses could vanish in a single blaze. So even as warmth soothes you, it also keeps you half alert. You brush your fingers along the brick. It is gritty. Your nails collect soot. In the distance, a train whistles. Railways now stitch the country together, carrying goods and people faster than any generation before. Their iron wheels also carry noise deep into the night. You imagine lying awake counting the intervals between passing carriages, your dreams threaded with the rhythm of steel on steel. And yet amid the smoke and clang there is a strange steadiness. You notice how neighbours call to one another across the street. A borrowed cup of sugar changes hands. A shawl is draped over a child's shoulders by someone who is not her mother, but might as well be. Community is compressed here, just like the houses. Privacy thins, but so does isolation. You pause beneath a flickering street lamp. Gaslight is spreading through urban centres, though not everywhere yet. Its glow is brighter than candlelight, almost modern in its insistence. Some scholars continue to debate whether the expansion of artificial lighting meaningfully altered ordinary people's sleep patterns at first, or whether exhaustion still dragged them to bed early regardless of illumination. As you watch the flame tremble behind glass, you sense that the answer shifts from street to street. The sky darkens fully now. Above the chimneys, only a few stubborn stars break through the haze. You inhale once more, slow and deliberate. This is where you will rest tonight. In a town remade by industry. In a house built for necessity rather than comfort. You will feel the rough weave of a blanket against your skin. You will hear your neighbours turn in their beds. You will drift in and out of dreams shaped by whistles and wheels. And as you step towards one particular doorway, hand hovering near the latch, you realise that the story of how ordinary people slept in industrial Britain begins not in silence but in sound. It begins in closeness, in shared walls and shared breath, in the quiet bravery of bodies lying down after 12 hours of labour. You push the door open and slip inside, ready to see just how many sleepers a single room can hold. You close the door behind you and the sound is softer than you expect. Wood swollen by damp rarely slams. It sighs into place. Inside, the air is warmer than the street, though not exactly fresh. It carries the layered scent of coal smoke, boiled potatoes, and the faint sourness of clothes dried too slowly by the hearth. Your eyes adjust to the dim light. One room, that is all there is. A commonly acknowledged fact about working-class housing in early industrial Britain is that many families occupied a single room or two at most, especially in rapidly expanding towns. Builders worked quickly and space was measured in rent rather than comfort. You stand near the small fireplace and let your gaze travel across the interior. A narrow table, a few mismatched chairs, a battered trunk that doubles as storage and seat. Along one wall, a bed frame. Beside it, something that looks less like furniture and more like a compromise. You take a step closer. The main bed is wide enough for 2 adults if they lie carefully. The mattress is stuffed with straw, as you heard earlier, and topped with a thin ticking fabric. It rustles faintly as the mother smooths it down. Her hands are red from washing, but her movements are precise. She knows every hollow and bump. She knows where the straw has shifted and where it needs shaking out. Long worn away by small hands, it rocks long worn away by small hands. It rocks gently. The youngest occupant is already asleep, cheeks flushed, breath whistling faintly through a blocked nose. You imagine yourself belonging to this room. You would not have a chamber of your own. You would not even have a door between you and the rest of your family. Privacy in this world is a thin curtain at best. Historians continue to debate whether this closeness fostered emotional resilience or simply reflected economic necessity without sentiment. As you look around, you sense tenderness woven through hardship. The father sits heavily on the edge of the bed. His boots remain on for a moment longer than necessary, as if removing them will confirm the day's end. He peels them off slowly. The smell of leather and sweat mingles with the smoke. His feet are sore. 12 hours on stone floors does that. You sit beside him in your imagination and feel the ache in your own arches. There are no cushioned insoles here, just skin bone and stubborn endurance. A small but curious detail might surprise you. In some districts, families practice what was known as hot bedding, where one shift worker would rise and leave for work just as another returned to sleep in the still warm sheets. It was not universal, but it happened often enough to be remembered. The idea might make you wrinkle your nose, yet warmth was a resource not to be wasted. In winter especially, a heated mattress was a luxury. You glance at the children. The older two have already curled up together on the pallet. One uses the other's arm as a pillow. They do not seem to mind. Bodies adapt quickly to shared space. A whispered argument over blanket territory fades into sleepy silence. Their breathing gradually synchronizes. There is something almost soothing about it, like the tide easing in and out. The mother lowers the lamp flame. Kerosene is precious. Light costs money. Darkness at least is free. Shadows lengthen and soften the edges of the room. The cracked plaster looks gentler now. The patched curtains over the window stir slightly in a draught you can barely feel. You lie down in the space imagined for you, perhaps squeezed between siblings or pressed close to a wall that holds the night's chill. You notice the texture beneath you. The straw mattress is uneven. It pricks through thin cloth. Every shift of your weight produces a faint rustle. You think of your own modern bed and resist the urge to compare too harshly. Here the goal is not cloud-like comfort, it is simple restoration. Muscles need to recover, limbs need to be ready for tomorrow's whistle. Outside a cart rolls past. The wheels grind against cobblestones. The sound filters through brick and plaster, muted but unmistakable. The town never truly sleeps. Somewhere a late shift is ending. Somewhere else an early one is about to begin. You feel how fragile this quiet is. There is also the matter of warmth. The fireplace embers glow low, casting a soft red pulse across the room. Heat radiates unevenly. Those closest to the hearth feel almost comfortable. Those near the outer wall sense the cold creeping through brick. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. It smells faintly of smoke and soap. Another widely recognized observation is that bedding was rarely washed as frequently as modern standards would demand, partly because laundering required enormous effort. Water had to be heated, soap was costly, and drying took time. Cleanliness existed, but it operated within practical limits. You inhale and accept the scent as part of life rather than a failure of hygiene. The father stretches out beside the mother. Their shoulders touch. There is no space for distance, literal or emotional. A hand finds another in the dark. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just contact. In a world that demands so much, even that small connection steadies you. You close your eyes. The room does not fall silent. It settles into layers of sound. A baby's soft snore, a cough from next door, the faint drip of water somewhere beyond the wall. The wind nudges the chimney and produces a low hum. You count these sounds instead of sheep. 1, 2, 3. As you drift, you wonder about dreams in such a place. Do they wander back to green fields left behind in the countryside? Do they replay the relentless rhythm of machinery? Scholars still discuss whether industrial workers experienced sleep as segmented, waking briefly in the night as earlier generations often did, or whether exhaustion pushed them into heavier, unbroken rest. You suspect it varies by age, by the hardness of the day. Your shoulder aches where it meets the wall. You shift carefully, trying not to wake the child beside you. The straw sighs again. King. The blanket slips. A small hand reaches out in sleep and grips your sleeve. You do not pull away, and in that simple, crowded stillness you begin to understand that rest here is communal. You borrow warmth from one another. You share breath. You trade small irritations for the comfort of not facing the dark alone. Tomorrow the whistle will call again. But for now, in this one room filled with many bodies, you let the layered sounds blur into a single low lullaby and you surrender to it. You do not wake gently. The morning does not seep in with birdsong and rosy light. It strikes. A factory whistle slices through the dark like a blade, long and shrill, vibrating the very air inside your lungs. Your eyes open before you understand why. For a split second you are nowhere at all. Then the room rushes back. The low ceiling, the pressed bodies, the last red wink of the hearth. A firmly established historical pattern of the industrial age is the replacement of natural rhythms with mechanical time. Before factories, many rural families rose with daylight and adjusted their pace to seasons. Now in towns like this, the clock and the whistle govern your sleep more strictly than the sun. You feel it immediately. The whistle is not a suggestion. It is command. The father shifts first. He is upright almost instantly, as though the sound is stitched into his muscles. You sense how practice has erased hesitation. There is no lingering in her bed, and no drowsy negotiation with the morning. He swings his legs over the side of the mattress and sits shoulders already bracing for the day. Colder now that the fire has thinned to colder, now that the fire has thinned to ash. Your breath forms a faint cloud. You consider briefly what it would mean to ignore the whistle, to burrow back under the blanket. The answer is simple and unromantic. Lost wages, fines, perhaps dismissal. In some factories, lateness was recorded meticulously. Repeated offences could cost you your position. Historians still argue whether workers experienced this new-time discipline as brutally alien at first, or whether generations raised within it gradually internalized its logic. As you sit up and rub your eyes, you suspect adaptation comes quickly when hunger is the alternative. The mother is already moving. She rekindles the fire with practiced efficiency, coaxing flame from reluctant embers. Sparks flare briefly, then settle into steady glow. The sound of kindling snapping is sharp in the quiet. You notice how even before full dawn, labour has resumed. Sleep here is not a separate realm. It is a pause between efforts. A small but intriguing detail from industrial towns is that some factories employed knocker-uppers, individuals paid to wake workers by tapping on windows with long poles. In neighbour Sours, where whistles were faint or shift staggered, this human alarm clock ensured punctuality. You imagine the soft but persistent tap against glass, a reminder that even your final minutes of rest could be externally managed. You pull on your clothes quickly. There is no leisurely dressing gown, no heated bathroom tiles. You layer shirt, waistcoat, worn trousers, fabric brushes cold against your skin. Your boots wait by the door, stiff and damp from yesterday. Sliding your feet inside is an act of will. The leather has not fully dried. It yields slowly. Outside the street stirs, doors open in sequence, footsteps echo, a cough erupts somewhere nearby, deep and rattling. You feel the collective movement of the neighbourhood like a tide pulled by invisible gravity toward mills and foundries. The sky is barely lightening, a pale grey bleeding into smoke. You step out into it. The air bites. Chimneys begin their daily exhale darker now against the paling horizon. Another whistle answers the first from a different factory across town. The calls overlap, each claiming its workforce. It is almost musical if you tilt your head just right. Almost. Children emerge too. You notice them rubbing eyes, clutching caps, their strides shorter but determined. A widely recognised fact is that child labour remained common in many industries throughout the early and mid-19th century, especially in textiles and mining. Legislation would gradually restrict hours, but enforcement was uneven. You watch a boy no older than 10 stifle a yawn and square his shoulders. Sleep for him has already been rationed by necessity. You fall into step with the others. The cobblestones are slick with dew and soot, your breath joins 100 others in pale clouds. No one speaks much. Words require energy. Energy must be conserved. You feel the weight of yesterday still in your limbs. There is a peculiar heaviness behind your eyes, a residue of incomplete rest. And yet as you walk, there is also a rhythm. Boots striking stone, the low murmur of movement, the distant churn of machinery beginning to stir. The town's pulse quickens. You realise that sleep and waking are no longer private transitions. They are synchronised events. Entire streets rise together. Entire districts fall silent together at night. Inside the factory gates, the noise intensifies. Iron clanks, belts whir, steam hisses. You feel how different this soundscape is from the layered hush of the shared bedroom. Some researchers have suggested that prolonged exposure to industrial noise may have reshaped workers' perception of silence itself, making true quiet feel almost unnatural. You wonder whether years from now the absence of machinery would make you uneasy. The shift begins, hours stretch, your body adjusts to repetition. Muscles remember motions even when your mind drifts. You think fleetingly of the bed waiting at home, of the rustle of straw, of the warmth of another body close by. That image becomes a small anchor, something to carry through monotony. By midday, fatigue settles deeper. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just a steady draining. You understand now why evenings in the industrial town feel so compressed. Energy is finite. After 10 or 12 hours, conversation shortens. Laughter softens. Sleep arrives not as luxury but as necessity. As the day edges toward its end, you feel anticipation building quietly. The promise of rest pulls you forward. Another whistle will sound. Gates will open. Streets will fill once more, this time moving homeward. You will retrace your steps past brick walls and smoky air. And when you finally push that door open again, stepping back into the single crowded room, you will know that every minute of sleep must be gathered carefully, protected fiercely, because morning will come just as sharply tomorrow. The whistle may rule your waking hours, but for a few fragile hours each night you will attempt to reclaim your own rhythm. By the time evening returns, your limbs feel carved from something heavier than bone. The factory has released you at last, and you walk back through streets that seem softer now, as though dusk has wrapped them in gauze. Smoke still hangs overhead, but it glows amber in the fading light. You carry the day in your shoulders and the faint ringing in your ears in the dry grit at the back of your throat. Watch as the mother lifts the mattress. Watch as the mother lifts the mattress from the bed frame and props it briefly against the wall. She shakes it with brisk, practiced motions. Dust rises in a faint cloud visible only where the lamplight catches it. The straw inside shifts with a whispering sound redistributing itself into something resembling evenness. It's well documented that straw remained one of the most common mattress fillings for working families well into the 19th century. Feathers were coveted but costly. Horsehair was durable but not always accessible. Straw, by contrast, could be replaced when harvests allowed, though even that required effort. You imagine the cycle of gathering, drying, stuffing, and stitching. This depends on agriculture as much as industry. You run your palm across the ticking fabric once the mattress is laid flat again. It is coarse, woven tightly, slightly scratchy against bare skin. The sheet placed on top is thin from years of washing. You notice the careful mending along one-edge stitches, so neat they almost disappear. Nothing is wasted. Not cloth, not warmth, not time. It was not universal, and it did not transform the way people lived. It was not a universal custom, was not universal, and it did not transform a piece of mattress to a meadow, but it was a modest attempt at comfort. You lean closer and imagine catching the faintest hint of something floral beneath the dominant aroma of smoke. The children help in their own way. One folds blankets, another gathers clothes from the line strung across the room. The cradle is nudged gently aside to create a sliver more floor space. You begin to understand that bedtime here is a choreography. Every object must shift to accommodate horizontal bodies. There is also the matter of damp. Brick walls absorb moisture easily. In colder months, condensation can gather along interior surfaces, seeping into bedding if left unchecked. You brush your fingers against the wall beside the bed and feel its coolness. A slight clamminess lingers there. Some medical thinkers of the period warned that damp sleeping quarters contributed to illness, though opinions differed on how and why. Debates among scholars have long circled around the extent to which housing conditions directly fueled respiratory disease as opposed to broader urban factors. You feel the chill and decide the distinction might not matter much at 3 a.m. You lie down slowly. The mattress yields unevenly, one hip sinks lower than the other. You adjust, then adjust again. The straw makes a faint crackling murmur. Your body gradually finds its compromised position. It is not perfect, but it is workable. Above you, the ceiling bears faint spoke stains radiating outward from where the fireplace breathes. Shadows tremble as the last of the lamp's flame dances. The mother lowers the wick carefully. Fuel must last the week. Darkness thickens around you. Another widely recognized element of working-class life was the reuse of textiles far beyond their intended lifespan. Blankets might begin as coats. Sheets might once have been shirts. Fabric passed through many lives before it was discarded entirely. As you pull the blanket up to your chin, you sense that it carries history in its threads. It has warmed other shoulders. It has absorbed other dreams. You shift your legs and feel the faint prick of straw pressing through the thin mattress. There is a certain honesty in it. No illusion of weightless support, just plant stalks arranged beneath cloth. You remember the smooth engineered surfaces of modern beds and suppress a gentle laugh. Here, comfort is negotiated rather than guaranteed. Outside, a late carriage rolls by, hooves strike stone in a steady rhythm. The sound travels easily through the thin walls. You realize that insulation as you understand it does not exist here. The house breathes in the noise of the street and exhales it into your dreams. You close your eyes and listen to the small interior symphony. A soft cough. The cradle's faint creak as someone nudges it with a foot. The low murmur of adult voices fading into silence. The fire collapses inward with a quiet sigh. There is an intimacy in this shared bedding that defies simple description. Bodies align not only for warmth but for reassurance. A child's foot rests against your ankle. A shoulder presses lightly into your back. In another era, in another social class, such closeness might feel intrusive. Here it is simply life. Some observers from wealthier backgrounds once described working-class beds with a mixture of fascination and alarm, noting how many occupants could share a single mattress. Yet others pointed out that shared sleep had deep historical roots stretching far beyond industrial towns. You sense that what has changed is less the practice of closeness and more the context in which it occurs. Industry compresses time. Industry compresses space. Industry leaves you craving horizontal stillness. As sleep approaches, you notice the way your body hums faintly, as though machinery still echoes in your muscles. The rhythm of the day does not vanish at once. It unwinds gradually, breath by breath. You imagine the straw beneath you as a field harvested and bundled, now transformed into the thin barrier between exhaustion and recovery. You imagine the hands that cut it, the wagon that carried it, the needle that stitched it into place. Even here in this darkened room, the wider economy rests with you. Cradled by straw and smoke and the steady cradled by straw and smoke and the steady warmth of shared bodies, you let the uneven surface hold you as gently as it can. At some uncertain hour of the night you wake. Not fully, not sharply, just enough to notice the air. It feels thicker than before, as though the darkness itself has weight. You draw a slow breath and taste coal on your tongue. Even indoors, even with the door latched and the curtains pulled tight, the outside world seeps in. This is a town powered by combustion. A broadly recognised historical truth is that coal fueled the industrial age in Britain, driving steam engines, heating homes and feeding factory furnaces. Its abundance made growth possible. Its smoke made sleep complicated. You lie still and listen to the faint hiss of wind slipping down the chimney. Somewhere above, a neighbour stirs boards creaking beneath shifting weight. The window is small and set deep into the brick. Earlier you noticed the thin film of soot along its edges. By morning there will be more. The air inside the room carries a layered scent. Faint ash from the hearth, damp wool drying slowly on a peg, the lingering trace of boiled onions from supper. You might wrinkle your nose at first, but after days here the mixture becomes almost ordinary. You turn your head slightly and catch a sliver of moonlight forcing its way past the curtain. The beam reveals particles drifting lazily. You watch them float suspended. It is difficult not to imagine them entering your lungs with each breath. Some 19th century physicians warned about the effects of smoky air on health, though explanations varied. Opinions ranged from fears of poisonous vapours to more measured observations about chronic coughs among urban workers. Historians continue to examine how early industrial pollution shaped long-term public health and how aware ordinary families truly were of the risks. Beside you someone coughs, a dry, persistent sound. It fades after a few moments, replaced by steady breathing. You feel a flicker of unease, not dramatic, but present. In such close quarters illness travels easily. You remember how thin the walls are, how narrow the street, how smoke from dozens of chimneys always settles like a blanket over everything. Sunset. Others crack them open despite sunset. Others crack them open despite the cold preferring fresh air to stagnation. Scholars have long debated how widespread such beliefs were and how they influenced daily practice. You imagine the quiet arguments that might have unfolded here. A mother insisting on a small gap for circulation. A father worried about drafts. Faint now, barely more than a memory. You faint now, barely more than a memory. You consider rising to feed it, but wood and coal are rationed carefully. Night heat must be balanced against morning need. A curious detail from certain industrial districts adds another layer to your thoughts. In some areas, residents reported that soot fell so heavily during the particular weather conditions that it resembled black snow settling on laundry and rooftops alike. You imagine waking to find your windowsill dusted in grey as though the sky itself had shed ash. Outside the town murmurs even in the small hours. A distant train rumbles along the tracks, its wheels producing a low metallic rhythm. The sound vibrates faintly through brick and mortar. You realise that silence here is never complete. There is always some mechanical heartbeat in the background. You roll onto your side, the straw beneath you crackles softly. Your cheek presses into the thin pillow which has flattened under years of use. You inhale again, slower this time. There is comfort in the predictability of these sensations, the rough weave of cloth, the steady rise and fall of breath around you. Another commonly acknowledged aspect of early industrial towns was the lack of systematic urban planning in their earliest growth phases. Houses clustered tightly around mills, often without proper drainage or open green space. You picture the narrow backyards, if they exist at all, and the close proximity of privies. All of it contributes to the air you breathe now. Yet even here there are moments of gentleness. The moonlight shifts as a cloud passes. For a few seconds the room brightens slightly, revealing the curve of a sleeping child's face, the outline of a hand resting on a blanket. You feel a quiet tenderness. These are not just bodies enduring conditions. They are people with stories, with memories of other landscapes perhaps. You wonder whether those who grew up in rural villages find the smoky nights unbearable at first, or whether familiarity settles quickly when wages depend on staying. The question lingers without firm answer. Gradually your senses dull. The heaviness in the air becomes background rather than focus. Your breathing falls into rhythm with the others. The train's rumble fades into distance. The cough does not return. Before sleep fully claims you again, you recognize something subtle. Despite the soot, despite the noise, despite the density of shared breath, this room holds a form of resilience. Families adapt. Windows are wiped. Bedding is shaken. Fires are tended. Life continues beneath the haze. You let your final thought drift upward like one of those floating particles caught in moonlight. Tomorrow the smoke will rise again. Tomorrow night you will lie down beneath it once more. For now you surrender to the thickened darkness, trusting that even in coal-heavy air, rest can still find you. Evening arrives with a certain ritual now. You feel it as surely as the whistle that once tore you from sleep. Supper has been cleared away, the last crumbs brushed from the table. The children's eyelids droop in stages, like shutters lowering one by one, and before darkness fully settles, there is the quiet business of managing light. You watch the mother lift the lamp from its hook. The glass chimney is smudged faintly with soot, and she wipes it carefully with a corner of cloth. Kerosene is poured sparingly. Every drop has a cost. Once lit, the flame trembles into life, small but determined. Its glow pools across the room in warm amber, softening sharp edges and disguising cracks in plaster. A widely acknowledged reality of 19th century working class life is that artificial lighting remained limited and relatively expensive for many families. Candles and oil lamps were used cautiously. Gaslight was spreading in larger streets and wealthier districts, but inside modest homes illumination often stayed dim and precious. You sense how light itself becomes part of the evening's calculation. How long can it burn before it must be lowered? Cradle casts a curved silhouette like a half moon. There is something intimate about this subdued brightness. It encourages closeness. It invites quiet conversation. A small and slightly surprising detail from the era adds a spark of tension to the scene. Accidental fires were common in crowded districts, sometimes sparked by overturned lamps or unattended candles. Entire rows of houses could be lost in a single night. That knowledge lingers even when no one speaks it aloud. You see the mother glance at the lamp more than once, ensuring it stands steady and well away from loose fabric. You imagine yourself reaching out to adjust the wick. The flame flares briefly, then steadies. Too high and it smokes heavily, too low and it gutters are blown out. There is an art to maintaining it, a subtle control learned through practice. Beyond the thin walls, other homes glow in similar tones. You can see faint halos of light through gaps in curtains across the street. Each room contains its own small circle of evening life. Somewhere someone reads aloud from a borrowed newspaper. Somewhere else a woman finishes mending by squinting at thread in wavering light. It has been noted by social historians that literacy rates rose steadily during the 19th century, even among working populations, partly due to expanding access to schooling and cheap print. You picture a father tracing lines of text with calloused fingers sounding out unfamiliar words. Light enables this quiet expansion of the knowledge, but only for as long as fuel allows. You shift on your chair and feel the fatigue in your back. The lamplight exaggerates every crease in your hands, highlighting the grime that soap did not fully remove. You rub your palms together and sense how heat from the flame warms only one side of your body, leaving the other in shadowed coolness. There is a gentle rhythm to these final waking moments. A child leans against you, head heavy on your shoulder. Another traces patterns on the tabletop with a fingertip fighting sleep. The father stares into the flame as though trying to read tomorrow in its movements. No one speaks loudly. Voices soften naturally, as if darkness demands reverence. Outside, a cart passes its wheels, sparking briefly where iron meets stone. The light from your window spills it onto the street in a thin band. You realize how visible you are from outside. Curtains offer modest privacy, but silhouettes still shift behind them. The town watches itself in these glowing rectangles. There is also the faint smell of fuel in the air. Kerosene carries a distinct sharpness mingling with coal smoke. You inhale and recognize it instantly. This is the scent of evening, of preparation for sleep. Some researchers continue to explore how the extension of evening light through lamps and gas altered traditional patterns of runner. Did brighter nights encourage longer waking hours, or did sheer exhaustion override any temptation to linger? As you look around the room, you sense the answer is layered. Light allows a few more moments of connection. It does not erase fatigue. At last, the mother lowers the wick. The flame shrinks, hesitates, then dims to a faint glow. Shadows thicken. The room exhales into near darkness. Only the fire remains as a small red pulse in the hearth. You stand and feel the shift immediately. Without the lamp, the world narrows. Objects blur into outlines. Sound grows more prominent. The soft rustle of straw, the quiet thud of boots set aside, the gentle creak of the cradle. You slip beneath the blanket once more. Your eyes take time to adjust. The ceiling disappears into blackness. You focus instead on sensation, the warmth beside you, the steady breath at your back, the slight scratch of fabric against your cheek. Outside, a distant street lamp hisses faintly, its gas flame steady and bright. Inside, your world contracts to the space between your shoulders and the next person's elbow. Light has retreated, leaving only shared warmth and the fading ember glow. You think briefly of the delicate balance maintained each night. Enough light to finish tasks, not so much that fuel is wasted. Enough warmth to keep chill at bay, not so much that tomorrow's supply is threatened. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you recognize that even something as simple as a flickering flame shapes the boundaries of your day. It decides when stories end, when conversation fades, when sleep is allowed to begin. The darkness settles fully now, wrapping the room in a soft, smoky hush. You let it take you gently, knowing that at dawn the whistle will once again tear a bright seam through the quiet. Sometime in the deep middle of the night, when the embers are barely breathing and the street has fallen into its lowest murmur, you become aware of another presence in the room. Not a stranger exactly, not quite family either, a lodger. You had noticed his boots earlier, placed neatly by the door, different in shape and wear from the father's pair. Now you hear him shift on the narrow truckle bed that has been pulled from beneath the main frame. The wooden wheels give a faint protest as he turns. You remember how before sleep the bed had been rolled out carefully to create space. By morning it will disappear again, tucked away like a secret. Was rarely light, and an extra few was rarely light, and an extra few shillings could mean the difference between security and worry. You sense the practical reasoning behind it. Space is limited, but wages are more so. The lodger clears his throat softly. You wonder what it feels like to sleep in someone else's family rhythm, to lie in a room where conversations have history you do not share. Privacy here is not simply thin, it is communal. You breathe in time with people who are not bound to you by blood but by necessity. A curious social detail from some industrial towns lingers in your mind. In certain cases, lodgers were expected to adhere to household rules about curfews and conduct sometimes even contributing to chores. They were guests, yes, but also contributors. The boundaries could blur. Tension might flicker if habits clashed. You adjust your position slightly, careful not to disturb the child, curled against you. The straw mattress rustles. Across the room, the lodger's breathing steadies. He works a different shift, perhaps. Or perhaps the same. Tomorrow he will rise at the same whistle and step into the same smoke. Some historians have suggested that taking in lodgers created complex social networks within industrial neighbourhoods, weaving households together through shared meals and overlapping routines. Others emphasise the strain such arrangements could place on already crowded homes. The truth likely shifts from door to door. As you lie here, you sense both the closeness and the quiet friction that proximity can produce. The air feels warmer, tonight thickened not only by coal smoke but by the collective heat of many bodies. You pull the blanket slightly lower from your chin. Your toes brush the edge of the pallet where one of the children sleeps. Beyond that, the lodger's truckle bed sits only a few feet away. There is no corridor, no dividing wall, just breath shared in darkness. Outside, a drunk voice rises briefly then fades into laughter. Somewhere down the street a door slams. The town never entirely relinquishes its hold on wakefulness. You imagine the lodger's thoughts drifting in this half-sleep state. Does he dream of another town, of a wife left behind in the countryside, of saving enough to rent a room of his own one day? It has been observed in social surveys of the era that mobility, both geographic and social, was a constant undercurrent in industrial Britain. Workers moved from rural villages to towns, from one factory to another, chasing steadier pay. Lodging arrangements often reflected that fluidity. Temporary beds for temporary stages of life. You turn your face toward the faintest glimmer of light at the window. The moon has shifted, casting a thin silver line across the floorboards. It touches the edge of the lodger's blanket, revealing its patched surface. He too lies under fabric that has known many winters. A subtle unease flickers at the edge of your mind. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Doors here are secured with simple locks. Windows are thin, valuables are few yet still precious. You realize how trust becomes part of nightly rest. Trust that the person sharing your space means no harm. Trust that neighbours will notice unusual sounds. Some scholars continue to explore how concepts of privacy evolved during the industrial period, suggesting that the idea of a private bedroom for each individual was more aspiration than reality for much of the population. As you lie in the dim room, that notion feels distant indeed. Individual solitude is a luxury beyond reach, yet there is something undeniably human about this shared existence. When the child beside you stirs and whimpers, it is the lodger who murmurs softly. First, a low, reassuring sound before the mother even wakes. You feel a small shift in perception. Perhaps bonds form quietly in such close quarters. The fire finally collapses inward with a soft sigh. Darkness deepens further. You sense the room settling into its deepest layer of rest. Breathing aligns. The town outside grows momentarily still. Tomorrow morning the truckle bed will slide away. The lodger will fold his blanket neatly and place it in the corner. He will step into the street with the rest of you, indistinguishable in the grey dawn. For now, though, he is part of the landscape of your sleep. You let your muscles release fully. The presence of another adult in the room no longer feels intrusive. It feels like part of the arithmetic of survival. Space divided, warmth multiplied, rent eased slightly. And in that narrow room beneath the ceiling, stained by years of smoke, you drift once more into dreams, aware that even in slumber, the industrial age arranges bodies with practical precisionness, weaving strangers into the fabric of nightly rest. Before dawn has fully gathered its strength, you feel the small body beside you stir with unusual urgency. This is not the slow, reluctant waking of an adult. It is a child bracing for duty. The whistle has not yet sounded, but habit is already pulling at young limbs. You open your eyes to near darkness. The air is cool, faintly metallic, with the scent of damp brick and coal. The older boy sits up on the pallet, rubbing his face with both hands. His hair sticks up in stubborn tufts. For a fleeting second, he looks like any child anywhere suspended between dream and day. Then he reaches for his cap. It's a well-established aspect of early industrial Britain that children formed a significant part of the workforce, particularly in textile mills and mines. Though reforms gradually reduced working hours and set minimum ages, enforcement varied vastly. In many households, a child's wages contributed meaningfully to rent and food. You watch him tug on boots that are slightly too large, perhaps handed down from someone taller. The mother moves quickly, pressing a small piece of bread into his hand. There is no elaborate breakfast. Time is measured tightly. He eats as he stands, chewing with sleepy determination. You imagine the texture of that bread slightly stale, but filling enough to steady him through the first hours. A small but striking detail from factory life lingers in your thoughts. In some mills, children were tasked with crawling beneath machinery to clear lint and debris while the machine still ran. The work required small bodies and quick movements. It was dangerous, though often framed as routine. You look at the boy's narrow shoulders and feel a quiet tightening in your chest. The whistle finally pierces the air. It sounds proper at this hour, as if morning amplifies its command. The boy flinches almost imperceptibly, then straightens. You rise too, not because you must work his shift, but because his departure shifts the entire room's balance. Sleep fractures. Outside, other small figures appear in doorways. Caps pulled low, scarves wrapped tight. Their voices are hushed not from solemnity, but from fatigue. You sense a shared understanding among them. Childhood and labour are not separate spheres here. They overlap in smoky streets. Some historians have debated how children themselves perceived this work. Was it experienced primarily as hardship, or did it also carry a sense of pride and contribution? Accounts vary. As you watch the boy step into the grey light, you sense both elements intertwined. He walks with purpose even if his eyelids droop. You follow to the threshold and watch him disappear down the lane. The sky is pale, streaked with early dawn. Chimneys begin their daily exhale. The town feels suspended in that fragile moment between night and full industry. Back inside the room feels emptier. Without him, though, bodies still fill it. The younger children remain tangled in blankets. The lodger shifts, preparing for his own departure. The father stretches stiffly, knowing his shift begins later. A broadly acknowledged development of the 19th century was the gradual introduction of factory acts intended to limit child labour and regulate hours. Yet change moved unevenly, shaped by economic pressures and local enforcement. You wonder how many such mornings will pass before reform touches this particular street. You lie back briefly, attempting to reclaim a fragment of sleep. But the quiet has shifted. Once one member of the household rises, the rhythm alters for all. The fire must be coaxed again. Water must be fetched. Clothing must be prepared. You close your eyes and picture the boy inside the mill now. The hum of machinery enveloping him. The air thick with cotton fibres. Light filtering through high windows and dusty beams. His small hands moving with practiced speed. You imagine how later tonight he will collapse onto the pallet with the heavy simplicity of total exhaustion. A faint beam of sunlight finally slips through the curtain, brushing the floorboards. It feels almost tender, at odds with the day's demands. You stretch your fingers into that light and let it warm your knuckles. There is a lingering question that scholars continue to explore regarding the long-term physical effects of early industrial labour on growing bodies. Height, lung capacity, resilience. The data is complex, shaped by diet and environment as much as by hours worked. As you breathe in the cool morning air, you sense how many variables press upon this single room. The mother stands quietly for a moment after the door closes behind her son. Her face holds something steady and composed, not dramatic sorrow, not visible pride, simply calculation, how much flour remains, whether rent is due this week, how to stretch each coin. You realize that sleep here is never isolated from economics. Every hour of rest is balanced against the hours of labour that sustain it. Even children's dreams are tethered to wages. We'll carry the mill's rhythm back into this room. He will bring with him the dust in his hair, the faint ringing in his ears, the deep fatigue that sends him into sleep almost before his head touches the straw. For now you stand at the doorway and watch the smoke thicken as daylight strengthens. The industrial age does not pause for youth. It folds children into its machinery and asks them to grow around it. And as the morning unfolds, you carry the image of that small figure walking into the grey dawn already shaped by whistles and work already learning that in this town sleep is earned early and deeply even by the very young. By the time evening folds itself around the street again, you have begun to notice something subtle but constant. The day does not truly end for the women of the house when the whistle releases the men and children. It simply changes shape. You step inside and find the mother still on her feet. The father sits heavily near the hearth boots, off eyes half closed. The boy who left before dawn lies curled on the pallet, already asleep, his breath deep and uneven. But she moves between table and fire with steady purpose. There are plates to wash, clothes to rinse, tomorrow's bread to consider. It is widely recognised by social historians that women in working-class industrial households often carried a dual burden of paid labour and domestic responsibility. Some worked in mills or as seamstresses during the day, then returned home to cook, clean, mend and manage family needs. Even those not employed in factories performed unending household work that was essential yet unpaid. You watch her hands red from water and soap as she scrubs a pot in dim light. Steam rises from the basin. It curls into the smoky air, briefly catching the glow from the fire. The scent of lye soap mixes with coal and damp wool. You can almost feel the sting on the chapped skin. There is no hot tap to turn. Water has been carried heated, rationed. Each task requires planning. A small and revealing detail from the period is that many women took in piecework to supplement family income, sewing garments or finishing textiles at home late into the night. Payment was often low and deadlines tight. You imagine her bending over fabric long after the children sleep, needle flashing in lamplight. Her eyes strain, her back aches, yet she continues. You sit quietly and observe how fatigue settles differently on her. It is not the single heavy drop of factory exhaustion. It is layered. Physical effort, mental calculation, quiet vigilance. She listens even while she works. Child coughs. The father shifts in his chair. The fire needs feeding. Some scholars have explored whether industrialization altered gender roles in lasting ways, pulling women more visibly into wage labor while still binding them to domestic expectations. The question remains nuanced, shaped by region and class. As you watch her move through this small room, you sense how public and private labour blur seamlessly. At last, she lowers herself onto the edge of the bed. For a moment, she simply sits, shoulders slumped, hands resting loosely in her lap. The firelight softens the lines around her eyes. You feel the weight of her day pressing gently downward. There is tenderness here too. She reaches to adjust the blanket around the sleeping boy, tucking it beneath his chin. She brushes a stray curl from his forehead. The gesture is automatic, nearly unconscious, but it carries warmth that no coal fire can replicate. Another commonly acknowledged feature of industrial towns was the strong presence of female networks. Women borrowed ingredients, shared childcare, and exchanged news across thresholds. Such informal support systems helped households cope with scarcity and illness. You picture whispered conversations at doorways earlier that day, a cup of tea shared briefly before returning to tasks. The lamp flickers as she trims the wick once more. Light dips and steadies. She pulls a small bundle of fabric from the trunk and begins to sew. The needle moves rhythmically in and out, in and out. It is almost hypnotic. You find yourself matching your breath to its pace. Outside the street is quieter now. A distant laugh drifts up, then fades. Somewhere farther away, a late shift still churns machinery humming faintly through the night air. You imagine how that sound must thread into her dreams. Went under-recorded in official documents, overshadowed by factory statistics and wage tables. Yet without it, the system would have faltered. Meals would not appear, clothes would not mend themselves, children would not rise in clean shirts. At last she sets the sewing aside. The lamp is lowered carefully, flame shrinking to a dim glow before vanishing. Darkness wraps the room once more. She lies down beside the father, careful not to wake him. You feel the shift as her weight settles into the mattress. The straw rustles softly. A quiet exhale escapes her lips longer than usual. The day releases her slowly. You lie there too aware of how sleep comes differently now. For her, it is not only recovery from labour, but preparation for another round of invisible effort. Morning will demand breakfast, tidying, perhaps washing, perhaps errands before any paid work begins again. In the darkness, you sense her breathing steady. The room returns to its familiar layered quiet. The boy murmurs in his dreams. The lodger coughs once and turns, and you understand that within these cramped walls beneath smoke-stained ceilings, women's work stretches long into the night, shaping the very conditions under which everyone else rests. Will be her footsteps you hear first, coaxing fire from ash, setting the cycle in motion again. The last of the washing has been hung to dry on the line stretched across the room, and the fire has been banked low for the night. But before anyone lies down fully, there is the matter of supper. You sit at the small wooden table and feel the quiet gravity of this daily ritual. It is simple, it is necessary, it shapes how you will sleep. The meal tonight is modest, potatoes boiled until their skin split, a small wedge of bread, perhaps a thin broth stretched with onions, and the faint memory of meat. A frequently noted reality of working-class diets during the early industrial age is that meals relied heavily on inexpensive staples such as bread, potatoes, and porridge, with meat consumed sparingly depending on wages and availability. You taste the starch on your tongue, earthy and filling. It settles heavily in your stomach. There is little conversation. Chewing replaces chatter. The boy who rose before dawn eats slowly, eyes drooping between bites. The father holds his spoon furlough as though anchoring himself to the table. The mother watches portions carefully, ensuring fairness without making it obvious. A small but intriguing dietary habit from certain regions comes to mind. In some industrial towns, tea became a central evening comfort, its warmth and mild stimulation offering both relief and energy. Sweetened with sugar when affordable, it was more than a beverage. It was a ritual. You lift a chipped cup to your lips and feel the gentle heat spread through your chest. The tannins leave a faint bitterness that lingers. As you eat, you notice how hunger shapes the room. It has been present all day, a quiet undercurrent beneath labour. Now it recedes slightly. Not entirely, just enough. You realise how directly food influences rest. A full stomach may bring heaviness. An empty one might produce restless turning. Researchers have long examined the connection between nutrition and sleep quality, particularly in industrial settings where wages fluctuated and food insecurity was common. While exact experiences varied, many families navigated a careful balance between sustenance and scarcity. You feel that tension in the measured portions placed before you. The fire crackles softly as you swallow the last bite. The warmth from the hearth seeps into your legs. Outside night presses gently against the window. The street has grown quieter now, though not silent. Somewhere a door closes. Somewhere else laughter bursts briefly, then fades. The plates are cleared and rinsed. Leftovers, if any, are wrapped carefully. Waste is unthinkable. The table is wiped down with a damp cloth, leaving faint streaks that catch the firelight. You run your fingers across the wood and feel its worn grain. You notice the boy leaning against the wall, eyes nearly closed. His body has claimed its right to a rest. The mother nods toward the pallet, and he collapses onto it without protest. Within minutes his breathing deepens. The day's labour has emptied him completely. Another well-recognised element of industrial life was the fluctuation of wages based on output or hours, which directly influenced the quantity and quality of food available. You imagine weeks when supper is thinner, nights when hunger gnaws quietly beneath blankets. The connection between factory floor and kitchen table is immediate and intimate. You feel your own eyelids growing heavy as digestion begins its slow work. There is a certain comfort in this shared fullness, modest though it is. The tea's warmth lingers in your chest. The potatoes sit solidly in your stomach. It is not abundance, but it is enough for tonight. Some observers of the era commented on the monotony of working-class diets. Yet others noted the creativity families employed in stretching ingredients into sustaining meals, stews thickened with barley, bread transformed into puddings, every crumb valued. As you lie back, you sense how nourishment and rest are intertwined threads in the same fabric of survival. The lamp is lowered. Darkness gathers once more. The fire glows softly, painting faint patterns on the ceiling. You settle onto the straw mattress and feel its uneven support beneath you. Your stomach is neither painfully full nor hollow. It rests in that narrow middle ground that allows sleep to approach without disturbance. Outside, a faint breeze shifts the curtain. Cool air brushes your cheek. You inhale deeply, catching the mingled scents of smoke and soap. Your body begins to soften, muscles unclench, thoughts drift. You reflect briefly on how something as simple as supper dictates the texture of the night. Too little food and sleep may be shallow, punctuated by discomfort. Too much and heaviness may press down awkwardly. Here balance is learned through necessity. The father's breathing steadies beside you. The mother shifts once, then stills. The lodger turns on his truckle bed, the wood giving a quiet creak. You let your mind wander towards the morning, then gently pull it back. Tomorrow's hunger can wait. Tomorrow's whistle can wait. For now, the warmth of tea and potatoes anchors you in the present. In this narrow room, beneath a smoke-stained ceiling, supper has done its quiet work. It has steadied limbs, softened tempers, and prepared bodies for the brief mercy of sleep. You close your eyes and allow the weight in your stomach to sink downward, carrying you slowly, steadily into rest. You are not sure what wakes you this time. There is no whistle, no clatter from the street, just a sound that does not belong to the steady rhythm of sleep. A cough, deep, persistent. It scrapes the quiet in a way that makes your eyes open instantly. It is harsher than the small throat. It is harsher than the small throat clearing of earlier nights. This one lingers, rattling slightly in his chest before fading into a shaky breath. You push yourself up on one elbow. The air feels warmer than usual, thick with shared breath, and the lingering smoke of yesterday's fire. You reach out and place a hand gently on his forehead. Too warm. Not burning, but not cool either. His skin is slightly damp. A commonly documented reality of industrial towns in the 19th century is that infectious diseases spread rapidly in crowded housing conditions. Limited sanitation, close quarters, and polluted air created environments where coughs and fevers could move swiftly from bed to bed. You feel that vulnerability now not as an abstract statistic, but as a small body shivering under a thin blanket. The mother is awake too. You hear her shift beside you. She moves quickly but quietly, dipping a cloth into a basin of water kept near the hearth. The cloth is wrung out and laid across the boy's brow. The gesture is practiced, not panicked. This is not the first fever to pass through this room. A small yet telling custom from the era drifts into your thoughts. Many families relied on home remedies passed down through generations, from mustard plasters applied to the chest to herbal teas brewed for coughs. Access to trained doctors existed, but for working families, cost and distance often meant care began at home. You imagine a jar of something sharp and pungent tucked into the trunk reserved for nights like this. The lodger stirs but does not speak. He knows better than to intrude. The father sits up, slowly rubbing his face. In the faint ember light, his silhouette looks larger than usual, as though worry expands him. Outside the town continues its muted murmur. Somewhere a cart rolls by. Somewhere else a dog barks once and falls silent. The world does not pause for a child's fever. Some historians continue to examine how industrial living conditions contributed to respiratory illnesses, such as bronchitis and tuberculosis, though the precise interplay between smoke-damp housing and malnutrition remains a subject of careful study. As you listen to the boy's breathing uneven but steady, the academic debate feels distant. What matters is the next breath. You sit closer and feel the warmth radiating from him. The blanket is adjusted, the cloth replaced. The mother whispers something soft, almost rhythmic. It might be a prayer, it might simply be reassurance. The air in the room grows heavier with each shared exhale. You consider cracking the window slightly despite the night chill. Fresh air might ease his breathing, yet the cold could worsen it. The decision hangs there, small but significant. A flicker of anxiety moves through you. In towns like this, illness can escalate quickly. You have heard stories, entire streets affected, work missed, wages lost, the fragile balance of rent and food thrown into uncertainty. Another broadly acknowledged feature of working-class life during this period was the reliance on informal neighbourhood support during sickness. Women might take turns sitting with a feverish child. Broths might be shared. News of a serious illness could travel rapidly down the lane. You imagine the quiet knock on the door tomorrow, a neighbour offering advice or sympathy. The boy coughs again, softer this time. His body relaxes slightly under the damp cloth. You watch the slow rise and fall of his chest. Count it. 1, 2, 3. Sleep feels distant now. Your own fatigue presses at the edges of your thoughts, but concern keeps you alert. The father eventually lies back down, though his breathing remains shallow. The lodger turns carefully, as if afraid even the creak of wood might disturb the fragile calm. Minutes stretch. The embers dim, further fading from red to faint grey. The cloth is replaced once more. The boy's forehead feels cooler now. Not cold, but less heated than before. You allow a small exhale of relief. In this cramped room, illness transforms the night into something watchful. Rest becomes lighter, more tentative. You lie back, but keep one ear tuned to every shift of breath. Eventually, the cough subsides into a quieter rhythm. The boy drifts into deeper sleep, though his breathing remains audible. The mother's hand rests lightly on his shoulder, even as her own eyes close. You settle once more onto the straw mattress. The uneven surface presses gently against your hip. The blanket smells faintly of smoke and soap. Outside, the town hums faintly in the distance. You realise that in industrial Britain, sleep is never guaranteed. It is negotiated nightly against hunger, noise, smoke and sickness. Nice pass peacefully, others demand vigilance. Tonight you hover between rest and watchfulness, aware of how thin the line can be between ordinary fatigue and something more serious. Yet as the room steadies again, breath aligning into a calmer pattern, you allow your eyelids to close. For now the fever has eased, for now the night holds, and you drift carefully back into sleep, mindful that dawn will arrive regardless, bringing with it both the whistle and whatever strength the boy has regained. By Saturday evening, the air in the street feels different. Not cleaner, not quieter, but charged with something lighter than the usual weekday fatigue. You sense it as you step outside after supper. The sky is streaked with fading gold, and though smoke still drifts above the chimneys, it seems less oppressive tonight. The week's wages have been collected, coins have changed hands, rent has been measured and set aside. What remains, however small, carries possibility. It is a broadly recognised feature of industrial Britain that Saturday was commonly payday for many workers, and with it came a brief release from the rigid structure of factory hours. You feel the shift in your own posture. Shoulders loosen slightly, steps slow just a fraction. The street hums with conversation. Doors stand open. A group of men gather near the corner caps, tipped back laughter rising into the warm evening air. Women lean against door frames, sharing snippets of news. Children chase one another between shadows, their energy briefly renewed. You walk toward the sound of music drifting from a nearby public house. It is not grand, just a small establishment with a low ceiling and a narrow entrance. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of ale and pipe smoke. Light from oil lamps casts a golden haze over wooden tables scarred by years of use. A small but colourful detail from the period surfaces in your thoughts. Some pubs featured informal singing contests or impromptu performances where patrons would take turns belting out ballads, sometimes comedic, sometimes sentimental. The songs carried stories of lost love, distant fields, or the humour of factory life. You hear a voice rise now slightly off-key but full of enthusiasm. Applause follows, uneven but sincere. You find a place along the wall and observe. The father stands among the group, mug in hand, his earlier weariness softened by camaraderie. The week's strain has not vanished, but it has been diluted by shared laughter. You notice how conversation flows more freely here than within the quiet walls of home. It's been noted by many social observers that public houses played a significant role in working-class communities, serving not only as places of drink, but as hubs of social exchange and mutual support. Some reformers criticised them as sources of vice, while others acknowledged their function as spaces of relief. The truth likely rests somewhere between those perspectives. You take a sip of ale yourself. It is bitter and cool, a sharp contrast to the smoky warmth of the hearth. The taste lingers at the back of your tongue. For a moment you close your eyes and simply exist in that sensation. Outside, the street remains lively, not wild but animated. Women stand in small clusters, children weaving between them. A fiddler appears near the corner bow, gliding across strings with surprising grace. A small circle forms around him. Feet tap in rhythm against stone. Some historians continue to explore whether such Saturday gatherings offered genuine emotional respite or merely a temporary distraction from structural hardship. As you watch neighbours laughing beneath lamplight, you sense that even temporary relief has weight. It matters. The mother has not entered the pub. Instead, she lingers near the doorway with other women, voices low but animated. There is a different kind of communion here. Recipes exchanged. Complaints aired. Jokes shared about husbands and wages. You see how community extends beyond bloodlines into the shared experience of survival. The boy recovered from his fever stands close to her side. His face is pale but brighter than it was the night before. He listens more than he speaks. His eyes follow the fiddler's bow with fascination. A curious observation from certain districts reveals that Saturday nights occasionally ended with makeshift dances in the street, especially during warmer months. Without formal halls, people created their own spaces of celebration. You watch as a pair of teenagers attempt a clumsy twirl, nearly colliding with a barrel. Laughter erupts. Time stretches gently. The rigid tick of the factory clock feels distant. There is no whistle tonight to shatter the mood. Even the smoke above seems to drift more lazily, as though acknowledging the pause. Eventually the lamps burn lower. One by one, neighbours retreat indoors. The father returns, cheeks flushed lightly, step steady if slightly slower than usual. The mother nods at him with a look that balances affection and practicality. Tomorrow may bring church bells instead of whistles, but rest still awaits. Inside the house, the atmosphere feels subtly altered. The laughter from outside lingers in the air like an echo. The boy smiles faintly as he curls onto the pallet. The father hums a fragment of the song he heard earlier. You settle onto the straw mattress, once more aware that the week's weight has been lifted just enough to make the bed feel slightly softer, not physically, emotionally. As darkness gathers and the last murmurs from the street fade, you reflect on how essential these small intervals of joy are. They do not erase exhaustion. They do not eliminate smoke or damp or narrow walls, but they carve out a pocket of light within it all. And as you drift towards sleep, you carry with you the memory of music rising above cobblestones of laughter, threading through coal-scented air of neighbours choosing for a few precious hours to set aside the whistle's command. Tomorrow the town will quiet again. Tonight you rest with the faintest hint of melody still echoing in your mind. Sunday arrives without the violence of a whistle. You notice the difference immediately. The morning light slips through the curtain more gently pale and unhurried. For a moment you lie still and savour the absence of mechanical command. The town feels suspended as though it has collectively exhaled. Outside, the street is quieter than usual. No early clatter of boots rushing toward factory gates. No urgent hiss of steam rising at dawn. Instead, you hear softer sounds. A door opening, a broom brushing stone, a distant bell beginning its measured toll. It is a well-recognised feature of 19th century Britons that Sunday was widely observed as a day of rest, particularly among working communities shaped by Christian practice. Though not everyone attended church regularly, the rhythm of the week bent noticeably around this pause. You feel it in your own body, a slight reluctance to rise quickly. The mother is already awake, but her movements lack the sharp urgency of weekday mornings. She smooths a shirt with careful hands, brushing away wrinkles. The father polishes his boots with a scrap of cloth, bringing a faint shine to the worn leather. Even in modest homes, Sunday demanded a degree of presentation. Respectability mattered. A small but telling detail from the era is that many families reserved their best garments for church, however simple those garments might be. A clean collar, a brushed coat, a ribbon tied carefully in a child's hair. Clothing signalled not wealth, but dignity. You run your fingers over the fabric of your own shirt and feel its slightly stiff texture freshly washed. The church bell rings again, steady and resonant. Its sound carries across rooftops and into narrow lanes. You step outside and join the slow stream of neighbours moving in the same direction. The sky is clearer today, though smoke still lingers faintly at the horizon. As you walk, you sense a different kind of conversation unfolding. Voices are lower, steps more measured. Children are reminded gently to behave. The boy who laboured all week now walks beside his parents' cap held in both hands. His earlier fatigue seems softened by the promise of routine without machinery. Inside the church, the air is cool and faintly scented with polished wood. Sunlight filters through coloured glass, casting muted hues across worn pews. You sit and feel the contrast to the cramped bedroom. Here, space stretches upward. The ceiling rises high, offering visual relief from low beams and smoke-stained plaster. Some historians have explored whether Sunday observance offered genuine spiritual renewal or primarily functioned as social regulation reinforcing norms of behaviour and discipline. As you listen to the sermon's steady cadence, you sense elements of both. There is comfort in shared prayer. There is also instruction about diligence and morality. The hymn begins voices lifting together in imperfect harmony. You feel the vibration in your chest as you sing. Even those who rarely speak during the week now contribute to a collective sound. It is different from the pub's laughter, quieter, more contained, yet equally communal. A curious social observation from industrial towns reveals that Sunday schools played a significant role in educating working-class children, teaching reading and writing alongside religious instruction. You imagine the boy tracing letters in a small booklet, absorbing skills that might one day shift his path. After the service, people linger outside, conversations bloom in the churchyard, news is exchanged, advice offered. You notice how illness mentioned quietly the night before is now discussed openly with suggestions for remedies and offers of help. The network of support extends beyond walls. Returning home, the pace remains unhurried. The meal is slightly more substantial today, perhaps including a small piece of meat saved for the occasion. The scent fills the room, richer than weekday fare. You feel gratitude for this modest abundance. The afternoon stretches long and quiet. The father dozes in his chair, newspaper resting on his chest. The mother sits by the window, mending in natural light rather than lamplight. The boy lies on the floor, staring at the ceiling, tracing shapes in smoke stains. There is a softness to this day that rarely appears elsewhere in the week. Even the sounds from neighbouring houses are subdued. Laughter drifts gently. A door closes without a slam. Yet you know the pause is temporary. Tomorrow the whistle will return. The factories will roar back to life. Some scholars continue to examine whether the strict separation of work and rest during this era intensified the contrast between exhaustion and relief, deepening the emotional weight of both. As you sit in the fading Sunday's light, you feel that contrast acutely. Evening settles gradually. The bell rings once more, marking the close of the day. You prepare for bed with a quieter mind than usual. The straw mattress awaits unchanged, yet somehow more welcoming after a day without machinery. As you lie down, you carry with you the lingering echo of hymns, the calm of shared stillness, the subtle dignity of clean clothes worn with care. Sunday has offered not luxury but reprieve. Folds gently around the room, you let that steadiness guide you into sleep before the industrial age reclaims its relentless rhythm at dawn. As you lie in the quiet after Sunday's calm, your thoughts drift beyond the brick walls and smoky sky. You remember, or perhaps imagine, another kind of night, one without the constant hum of machinery, one where darkness feels wider, not pressed between terraces. Many who fill these industrial streets did not begin their lives here. It is widely documented that the industrial age drew vast numbers of rural migrants into growing towns, pulled by the promise of wages and pushed by agricultural changes that reduced traditional work. You picture yourself arriving years ago with a small bundle of clothes stepping off a cart into air already thick with coal. In the countryside, nights carried different sounds. Wind moving through hedgerows, owls calling across open fields, the distant lowing of cattle. Sleep there may have been interrupted by animals or weather, but the sky stretched wide overhead. You sense the contrast now lying beneath a low ceiling stained by smoke. A small but revealing detail from rural life lingers in your mind. In many villages, families once practiced segmented sleep rising for a brief period in the middle of the night to tend fire's prey or simply sit quietly before returning to bed. Some scholars continue to discuss whether such patterns faded quickly under industrial schedules or persisted quietly among migrants who carried old habits into new environments. You turn onto your side and feel the straw mattress rustle. The air inside this room feels closer than any country cottage you might recall. Walls here are thin. Neighbours breathe only inches away beyond brick. The sky is visible only as a narrow strip above rooftops. The steady rumble of carts and trains replacing the hush of fields. Adjustment may not have been immediate. Some historians suggest that early migrants struggled with the sensory overload of industrial towns, while others adapted quickly out of necessity. The evidence tells different stories depending on whose voice you hear. You imagine your first night in such a terrace house. The unfamiliar creak of boards, the cough from the next room, the faint metallic clang from a distant yard. Sleep might have come slowly wrapped in homesickness. Yet over time, the town's rhythms become familiar. The whistle once jarring turns predictable. The smoke once suffocating becomes background. You begin to measure days not by sun angles but by shifts. Nights shrink or stretch according to factory demands rather than harvest seasons. There is a subtle exchange happening here. The countryside offered space but less cash. The town offers wages, but less sky. You feel that trade in your bones as you lie awake for a moment longer. A modest yet telling observation from migration records reveals that many families maintained ties to their rural origins for years, sending letters, visiting when possible, sometimes returning during slack periods. Industrial identity did not erase rural memory overnight. You picture a letter folded carefully in the trunk, edges worn from rereading. Outside, the town is quieter than usual tonight. Sunday's hush still lingers, but even in silence, the outline of chimneys cuts against the dim sky. The industrial age leaves its signature everywhere. You shift and pull the blanket tighter. The room's warmth feels different from that of a rural hearth. Coal burns hotter and dirtier than wood. Its smoke clings to fabric, yet it provides steady heat when wood might be scarce. Again exchange. Some researchers have pondered whether migrants viewed industrial sleep as more secure because wages allowed regular rent, or less secure because housing was crowded and precarious. The answer likely shifted with each family's fortune. You sense both gratitude and constraint in the same breath. The boy beside you murmurs softly, perhaps dreaming of fields he barely remembers, or of machinery he now knows too well. His childhood straddles two worlds. You close your eyes and imagine standing once more at the edge of a rural field at dusk, the skywide stars sharp and numerous. Then you let that image dissolve and replace it with the terrace street under gaslight neighbours' windows glowing like small constellations. Industrial Britain did not simply transform the work. It reshaped where and how people slept, compressing bodies into brick rows, aligning rest with mechanical schedules, weaving strangers into nightly proximity. And yet within these walls, memory persists. The smell of hay tucked into a mattress. The habit of rising briefly in the night, the quiet longing for open air. As sleep approaches again, you realise, though, that your rest now carries both landscapes within it. The wide fields of memory and the narrow room of present reality overlap gently in your dreams. Tomorrow smoke will rise once more, the whistle will call, but tonight you lie suspended between past and present rural hush and urban murmur, feeling how the industrial age has folded countless countryside nights into the tight embrace of terraced sleep. There are nights when your own room feels almost spacious compared to what waits elsewhere in the town. Tonight you follow a different path after dusk, stepping beyond your familiar doorway and into a larger lodging house on a nearby street. The building looms slightly taller than the terraces, its windows crowded with faint light. Inside, the air is thicker, layered with the scent of many bodies and damp wool. A long hallway stretches before you, lined with doors that open onto rooms far more crowded than your own. It has been widely observed that as industrial towns expanded, boarding houses multiplied to accommodate transient workers, single men, widows, and those newly arrived in search of employment. These establishments varied greatly in quality, from respectable homes with strict rules to overcrowded spaces teetering on discomfort. You step into one such room. Bunks line the walls, stacked 2 or even 3 high. The mattresses are thin, stuffed with straw or flock. Blankets are folded at the foot of each bed, their surfaces worn smooth by years of use. A single lamp hangs from the ceiling, casting a pale glow across faces in various stages of fatigue. A small but striking detail from some lodging houses is that beds were sometimes rented in shifts, much like factory labour. One occupant would vacate in the early morning as another claimed the same space for the day. The mattress barely had time to cool. You imagine lying down on sheets still warm from another's sleep, the imprint of a stranger's body lingering faintly beneath you. The soundscape here is different from your family room. There is less intimacy, more anonymity. Coughs echo without names attached. Snores overlap in uneven chorus. Boots are set down in rows near the wall, their leather damp and scuffed. You find a narrow bunk and sit carefully. The wooden frame creaks in protest. You run your hand across the mattress and feel its uneven surface. It is thinner than the one at home. The blanket smells faintly of soap and something older, less identifiable. Researchers have long discussed how such shared accommodations influence notions of privacy and personal space. In a society already accustomed to communal sleeping arrangements, lodging houses intensified the experience by placing unrelated adults in close quarters. Whether this fostered camaraderie or quiet tension depended greatly on circumstance. You lie back and stare at the ceiling beams. The lamp flickers as someone adjusts its wick. Shadows ripple across the room, briefly illuminating a row of faces. Some are young cheeks smoothed despite exhaustion. Others bear lines carved by years of labour. A murmur of conversation drifts from a corner. 2 men discuss wages at a nearby mill, voices low but animated. Another man laughs softly at a remembered story from his village. For a moment the room feels less like a warehouse of bodies and more like a temporary community. Yet there is an undercurrent of impermanence here. Trunks are small, possessions few. Many who sleep in this house may move on within weeks, chasing better pay or steadier work. You sense how brisk sleep becomes a waypoint rather than an anchor. A well-documented trend of the 19th century was the constant movement of labourers between towns following industrial demand. Boarding houses absorbed this mobility, offering short-term shelter in exchange for modest fees. Stability was measured not in ownership but in access. You close your eyes and attempt to relax. The bunk shifts slightly as the man above you turns. Dust sifts down in tiny particles. Somewhere across the room, a cough erupts sharply before subsiding. The air feels warmer here than in your family room, thickened by sheer numbers. You focus on your breathing, matching it to a steady rhythm. In and out. The sounds around you blend into a low while hum. You imagine the dozens of separate dreams unfolding simultaneously in this space, each shaped by different memories and ambitions. Some scholars have questioned whether the growth of lodging houses eroded traditional family structures or simply reflected economic realities of industrial life. As you lie in this crowded room, the answer feels less theoretical. For many, this is not a choice but a step along a path. Gradually the lamp is lowered. Darkness settles unevenly, punctuated by the faint glow of embers in a small stove near the wall. You turn onto your side, careful not to press too hard against the thin mattress. Sleep approaches differently here. It is lighter, perhaps edged with awareness of unfamiliar bodies nearby. Yet exhaustion still exerts its pull. You surrender to it, slowly letting the layered breathing of strangers become a kind of lullaby. In this boarding house, beneath beams darkened by years of smoke, rest is shared not through kinship but through circumstance. And as you drift off, you understand that the industrial age does not merely compress families into single rooms. It gathers entire streams of workers into communal spaces, weaving transient lives together for a few fragile hours each night before scattering them again at dawn. Winter does not announce itself politely in this town. It seeps through brick and creeps beneath doors. You feel it first in your fingertips as you reach for the blanket before dawn. The air in the room bites sharply, turning each breath into a pale cloud that dissolves above you. The fire in the hearth has burned low overnight, reduced to faint grey ash. You hesitate before leaving the warmth of shared bodies. The straw mattress feels colder at its edges, as though the chill has settled there deliberately. It's well documented that many working-class homes in industrial Britain were poorly insulated, with single brick walls and small fireplaces struggling to heat entire rooms. Winter amplified every weakness in construction. Frost sometimes traced delicate patterns along interior window panes. You glance toward the glass now and see a faint lace of ice clinging to its corners. The mother rises first, as always, wrapping a shawl tightly around her shoulders. She kneels before the hearth and coaxes flame from stubborn embers. The sound of kindling catching is sharper in cold air. Sparks leap briefly before settling into steady glow. You stretch your hands toward the fire, feeling pins and needles as warmth returns to stiff fingers. A small but curious practice from certain regions involved warming bricks by the hearth and wrapping them in cloth to place at the foot of the bed before sleep. These improvised bed warmers offered modest comfort against the night chill. You imagine tucking one beneath your blanket, the heat slowly fading as you drift off. Outside, the street is hushed under a thin layer of frost. Footsteps crunch differently on stone. Smoke rises more visibly from the chimneys, darker against the pale sky. The whistle, when it sounds, seems even more piercing in the brittle air. Some historians continue to examine how seasonal cold affected productivity and health in industrial towns, noting increased respiratory ailments during harsh winters. Whether the primary culprit was damp housing, polluted air, or simple exposure remains a subject of ongoing discussion. As you pull your coat tighter around you, the distinction feels academic. The cold is immediate. Inside the room, layers become your shield. Wool over cotton, scarf wound snugly at the neck. The boy's cap pulled low to cover his ears. You notice how clothing doubles as bedding at night. Coats are sometimes draped over blankets for extra insulation. Every textile serves multiple purposes. Evenings in winter carry a particular intensity. Darkness arrives early, pressing against the window by late afternoon. The lamp is lit sooner, its flame trembling in draughts that sneak through unseen cracks. You sit closer to the hearth, feeling how the fire becomes the room's focal point. Conversations cluster around it. Silence gathers near it. A commonly acknowledged aspect of industrial winter life was the careful rationing of coal for domestic use. While factories consumed vast quantities, households often balanced cost against comfort, stretching fuel as far as possible. You watch the mother add small pieces, deliberately avoiding excess. At night, the bed feels both refuge and challenge. The straw mattress holds no inherent warmth. It must borrow heat from bodies. You slide beneath the blanket, quickly drawing it up to your chin. The cold lingers at your feet until someone shifts closer. Gradually, shared warmth spreads. There is a hush to winter nights that differs from summer's restless murmur. The street quiets earlier. Doors remain closed. Even laughter seems muted by the cold air outside. Researchers have sometimes debated whether harsh winters intensified communal bonds in crowded housing, forcing families into closer proximity around limited heat sources. As you lie shoulder to shoulder in the dim glow of embers, that possibility feels tangible. Closeness becomes necessity. Your breath mingles with others in faint clouds before fading. The ceiling above appears darker than usual, smoke stains blending into shadow. You listen to the fire's soft crackle, grateful for its steady presence. Somewhere beyond the wall, a neighbour coughs sharply, then pulls a blanket tighter. The sound travels easily through brick thinned by frost. You sense how entire rows of houses experience this season together. Gradually, warmth builds beneath the covers. The initial sting of cold recedes, replaced by a deep enveloping heat drawn from shared bodies and careful fuel. You feel your muscles relax despite the chill that lingers near the outer wall. Winter in this industrial town is not gentle. It tests construction stamina and savings alike. Yet each night, beneath smoke-stained ceilings and frost-edged windows, families carve out small islands of warmth. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of breathing guide you inward. Outside, frost settles silently on cobblestones. Inside, the fire glows steady, its light soft and reassuring. And as sleep finally wraps around you, you understand that in winter, rest is not simply recovery from labour. It is resistance against cold achieved through closeness as caution and the quiet persistence of flame. Summer does not arrive with gentleness either. It presses down instead, heavy and insistent, turning the narrow terrace into a brick oven that never quite cools. You wake before the whistle this time, not from noise or cough, but from heat. The air feels thick against your skin, almost damp. The blanket has been pushed aside during the night. Your shirt clings slightly to your back. Even the straw mattress beneath you seems warmer, holding on to yesterday's sun as though reluctant to let it go. You turn your head toward the window, hoping for a breath of relief. In many industrial towns, attic rooms and upper floors became particularly stifling during summer months as slate roofs absorbed and radiated heat long after sunset. It is a frequently observed feature of working-class housing that ventilation was limited, especially where windows were small or kept closed for security. You sit up slowly and feel the stillness of the air. The mother has already cracked the window slightly despite concerns about soot and street noise. A faint current drifts inward, carrying with it the mixed scents of early morning. Coal smoke lingers, but it mingles now with something softer. Perhaps the faint sweetness of a nearby garden struggling bravely in a narrow yard. A small and somewhat unexpected detail from certain urban districts emerges in your thoughts. On particularly hot nights, some families chose to sleep partially clothed, or even outdoors in small courtyards when space allowed. Modesty and practicality negotiated carefully with comfort. You imagine stepping into a backyard under open sky, seeking even a whisper of breeze. The whistle sounds, though its sharpness seems dulled by the heavy air. You rise reluctantly, wiping perspiration from your brow. Dressing feels like layering warmth upon warmth. Fabric sticks briefly before settling. Outside, the street is already alive with sound. Windows stand open in defiance of soot. Voices carry farther in warm air. You notice children fanning themselves with scraps of paper, seeking relief before the day's labour begins. Some scholars have examined how seasonal heat influenced productivity and sleep patterns during the industrial age, suggesting that sweltering nights could fragment rest, leaving workers more fatigued at dawn. As you rub your eyes, you sense how true that might be. Sleep in summer feels lighter, interrupted by the need to shift to seek cooler patches on the mattress. Evening brings little relief at first. The sun lingers, stretching daylight into hours that feel almost luxurious yet physically draining. Gas lamps are lit later. Conversations spill into the street more easily. Doors remain open longer. You sit on the doorstep with neighbours, letting the faintest breeze brush your face. The brick beneath you radiates stored warmth. Children chase one another until called inside, their laughter bright and restless. A widely acknowledged transformation of the 19th century was the increasing availability of cheap cotton clothing which offered lighter garments for warmer months. You feel the difference now as you loosen your collar, slightly grateful for fabric that breathes more easily than heavy wool. Inside the room, preparations for sleep shift subtly. The fire is kept minimal, used only for essential cooking. The blanket is folded at the foot of the bed rather than pulled close. You lie down and stretch your limbs carefully to avoid pressing too closely against others. Shared warmth, so welcome in winter, becomes something to negotiate delicately in summer. You notice the sounds more acutely tonight. A distant train rumbling along heated tracks. A burst of song from a group lingering near the pub. The faint buzz of insects drawn to lamplight. The open window allows the town to seep in more fully. Some historians continue to debate whether industrial workers experience summer evenings as moments of relative freedom due to extended daylight, or whether fatigue remained the dominant sensation regardless of season. As you lie there listening to street sounds drift through the window, you sense both possibilities. Light invites lingering. Labour insists on rest. The straw mattress beneath you feels slightly pricklier in the heat. You shift to find a cooler patch. A child's arm drapes loosely across your side, sticky with warmth. You gently reposition it without waking him. Gradually the air cools by a fraction. The heat of the day begins its slow retreat. The breeze strengthens slightly enough to stir the curtain and brush your cheek. You close your eyes and focus on that movement. In and out, in and out. Summer in this industrial town is not idyllic. Smoke still hangs above rooftops, work still demands early rising. Yet the longer evenings carve out moments of shared outdoor life, of conversations carried under open sky. As sleep approaches, it does so in stages. You drift awake briefly to shift position, then drift again. The night air moves softly across your skin, carrying faint echoes of laughter and distant machinery. Eventually, exhaustion claims you fully despite the lingering warmth. Your breathing steadies. The mattress, though imperfect, holds you in place, and beneath the heated slates and smoky sky you surrender to summer's restless embrace, knowing that even in heavy air the body finds a way to rest before another whistle calls you back into motion. There are evenings when the air feels charged with something quieter than music and softer than laughter. You sense it now as twilight gathers, painting the brick walls in muted shades of blue and gold. The day's labour has ended, but as sleep has not yet claimed the street. Instead, a different rhythm begins to unfold. You linger near this doorway, pretending to adjust your coat while your eyes search the opposite side of the lane. A familiar figure stands half in shadow, half in lamplight. There is no grand declaration, no sweeping gesture, just a glance held a second longer than necessary. It has long been observed that courtship in working-class industrial communities often unfolded in shared public spaces rather than private rooms. With homes crowded and privacy scarce, doorsteps, alleys and lamplit corners became stages for tentative conversation. You step forward slowly, aware that every movement is visible to someone. The street hums gently around you. A woman shakes a rug over a railing. A child drags a stick along the cobbles. Somewhere farther down, a pair of men argue softly about wages. Yet within this ordinary scene, a small pocket of intimacy forms. You stand beside the person you have been watching all week. Words come cautiously at first. A comment about the heat, a joke about the whistle. Laughter follows, quiet and shared. You feel the strange mixture of vulnerability and boldness that comes with speaking under open sky. A curious detail from certain urban neighbourhoods reveals that some couples time their meetings carefully to coincide with communal activities, blending private intentions into public life. Lingering near a pump, offering to carry a parcel, even walking a few extra steps after church could signal interest. You recognise those small signals now woven into the fabric of daily routine. The lamplighter passes at the end of the street, raising his pole to ignite the gas flame overhead. The light flares briefly, then steadies. Its glow outlines your faces, softening features and sharpening silhouettes. Shadows stretch behind you like quiet witnesses. Some scholars have explored how limited domestic space influenced expressions of romance, suggesting that emotional intimacy often developed within the constraints of visibility. Privacy in this context became less about physical separation and more about shared focus amid distraction. As you stand shoulder to shoulder, you sense how the surrounding noise fades slightly, though it never vanishes entirely. You speak of small things at first. The coming Sunday, a neighbour's new baby, the rumour of a better-paying position at a nearby mill. Beneath the surface of these topics, something steadier grows. A door opens nearby and you instinctively step a fraction apart. Appearances matter. Respectability is a currency almost as valuable as wages. In tightly knit streets, reputations travel swiftly, yet there is warmth here that no factory can produce. The brief brush of fingers as you exchange a folded scrap of paper, the shared smile that lingers even after words have ended. You feel your pulse quicken slightly, contrasting subtly with the slow fatigue that usually defines evening. It is worth noting that marriage patterns in industrial Britain shifted in response to economic conditions, with some couples delaying unions until wages felt secure enough to support a household. Whether such caution strengthened relationships or merely postponed them remains an open question among historians. As you stand beneath the gaslight, you sense how love and livelihood intertwine tightly. The conversation drifts, a promise to meet again tomorrow, perhaps only for a moment, perhaps after the whistle. There is no elaborate farewell, just a nod and a glance that holds meaning far beyond its simplicity. You turn back toward your door, feeling the subtle change within your chest. The room inside remains the same. Straw mattress, shared walls, faint scent of coal, yet something feels lighter. As you lie down later, the memory of that lamplit exchange warms you in a way the hearth cannot. The sounds of the street continue as always. A cart passing, a distant laugh, the faint hiss of gaslight. But your thoughts linger on the curve of a smile seen in shadow. Even in cramped terraces and smoke-heavy air, tenderness finds space. It threads itself through narrow lanes and shared thresholds, adapting to circumstances without surrendering entirely. You close your eyes and feel the straw beneath you, the warmth of family at your side, the faint echo of conversation still resting on your lips. Tomorrow will bring machinery and measured hours. Tonight your dreams carry a softer rhythm, and in that small, smoky street beneath a single steady lamp, affection has carved out its own quiet corner, before sleep gently takes you once more. There are figures who belong to the night as surely as factory hands belong to the day. You notice them more clearly now as you step outside after supper, letting the cooler air brush your face. The street is neither fully awake nor entirely asleep. It hovers in between. At the far end of the lane, a man moves with deliberate pace, carrying a long pole tipped with flame. He pauses beneath each gas lamp, lifting the pole carefully to coax light into life. The glass flickers, then steadies into a warm glow. It has been widely recorded that lamplighters became familiar presences in 19th century towns, tending to street illumination long before automated systems existed. You watch him progress methodically, creating small islands of brightness in the gathering dark. His work is quiet but transformative. Each lamp pushes the night back a few feet, revealing doorways, cobbles, and the faint outlines of passing faces. You sense how these lights extend the usable hours of the evening, allowing neighbours to linger outdoors a little longer. A small but intriguing detail from certain urban districts reveals that children sometimes followed lamplighters at a distance, fascinated by the ritual of flame-touching glass. It was a nightly performance of sorts, simple yet captivating. You can imagine small figures trailing behind eyes reflecting amber light. As you continue down the street, another presence emerges, a night watchman, coat collar turned up against the chill staff in hand. He moves steadily, occasionally striking the pavement with his stick to signal vigilance. In many towns, such watchmen were employed to deter theft and maintain order during the dark hours. Their footsteps became part of the nocturnal soundscape. You pause as he passes, nodding briefly. There is reassurance in his routine. The industrial age brought not only machinery but also denser populations, and with density came concerns about safety. The watchman's presence answers that anxiety, at least symbolically. Some historians continue to examine how the expansion of street lighting influenced patterns of crime and social interaction, questioning whether brighter streets genuinely reduced danger or simply shifted it elsewhere. As you stand beneath the newly lit lamp, you feel safer, though you cannot quite explain why. The glow from the glass casts long shadows across the brick. You notice how your own silhouette stretches and contracts as you move. The town appears almost theatrical in this light, as though each doorway conceals a story waiting to unfold. A faint breeze carries the scent of damp stone and coal smoke. You inhale, slowly, aware that even the air seems altered by lamplight. Without it, darkness would press more heavily against windows and thresholds. Inside your house, the room feels warmer in contrast to the night outside, yet you leave the door open a moment longer, watching the lamplighter's progress as he nears the next corner. His flame dwindles as he moves away, replaced by steady glass encased fire behind him. It has often been noted that the introduction of widespread street lighting changed the character of urban evenings, encouraging modest commerce and social activity after sunset. Shopkeepers kept doors open slightly longer. Conversations drifted into later hours. You sense that extension now, even if exhaustion still pulls you toward bed. The watchman's staff strikes stone again in the distance, a steady reminder that someone is awake while others sleep. The sound echoes softly, then fades. You step back inside and close the door gently. The room dims as you lower the lamp. The outside world, newly illuminated, continues its quiet vigilance beyond your thin walls. Lying down, you reflect on the unseen labour that supports your rest. The lamplighter's careful flame, the watchman's measured patrol, their work unfolds while you surrender to sleep, shaping the safety and rhythm of the night without demanding recognition. Your straw mattress rustles as you settle. The faint glow from the street filters through the curtain, casting a pale band across the floorboards. It is different from moonlight, more deliberate, human-made. Some scholars have debated whether such artificial light gradually altered perceptions of night itself, softening its mystery and shrinking its shadows. As you gaze at the thin line of brightness near the window, you wonder if darkness now feels less absolute than it once did in rural fields. The sounds outside grow quieter as the hours deepen. The watchman's steps fade into memory. The lamplighter has long since finished his route. Only the steady glow remains, marking the boundary between your room and the broader town. You close your eyes and allow that faint light to comfort rather than disturb you. In this industrial landscape, rest depends not only on your own exhaustion, but on a network of quiet guardians who tend flame and patrol stone. And as sleep draws you inward, you carry with you the image of a man lifting fire to glass, one lamp at a time, shaping the contours of the night so that you may drift safely into it. There are nights when the glow of the street lamp feels reassuring, and there are nights when it feels like exposure. You sense the difference now as you lie awake a little longer than usual, listening to footsteps pass outside your door. The latch is simple. A small metal mechanism set into wood worn smooth by years of use. You glance toward it in the dim light, aware of how thin the barrier is between your shared room and the street. In industrial towns where populations swelled rapidly, overcrowding and poverty sometimes brought anxiety about theft and disorder, it is a documented reality that crime rates in certain districts rose alongside urban growth, though experiences varied widely from neighbourhood to neighbourhood. A cart rattles by more quickly than usual. Voices follow, hushed and hurried. You cannot make out the words, only the tone. It fades, replaced by the familiar hush of late evening. You roll onto your side and feel the straw mattress shift beneath you. The child beside you murmurs but does not wake. The father's breathing remains steady, yet your ears stay alert, tuned to every creak of floorboard and whisper of wind against brick. A curious detail from some urban neighbourhoods is that families occasionally wedge chairs beneath door handles at night for added security, a small gesture of reassurance in the absence of sturdy locks. You picture such a chair now angled firmly into place, its wooden legs braced against intrusion. Outside, a burst of laughter erupts suddenly, followed by a sharp exchange of words. It does not escalate. It dissipates as quickly as it began. Still, your pulse quickens for a moment before settling. Some historians continue to debate whether 19th century urban crime was perceived as more threatening than it statistically was, shaped by sensational newspaper reports and moral panic. As you lie in the dim room, the question feels less academic. Perception alone can disrupt rest. You listen to the faint hiss of the street lamp beyond the curtain. Its steady glow seeps through fabric, casting a thin ribbon of light across the floor. The watchman's staff strikes stone once in the distance, a reassuring punctuation mark in the night. Inside the room, the air feels warmer than the street outside. Shared breath and banked embers create a cocoon of sorts. You draw the blanket slightly higher around your shoulders. The scent of smoke and soap mingles here, familiarly. For one another, stepping in if unfamiliar for one another. Stepping in if unfamiliar figures lingered too long or disturbances grew louder than usual. You imagine the quick exchange of glances from window to window, silent communication in the dark. A faint scraping sound comes from beyond the wall. You hold still. It repeats softer this time. Then you recognize it as a loose shutter, shifting in the breeze. Relief washes over you quietly. Sleep in such surroundings is not always deep. It is layered with awareness, especially in streets where doors open directly onto public space. You sense how the architecture itself shapes your sense of safety. No front garden, no buffer, just threshold meeting cobblestone. Yet there is also resilience here. The father shifts slightly and clears his throat, an unconscious assertion of presence. The mother's hand rests lightly on the edge of the mattress, close enough to respond if needed. The lodger's steady breathing adds another layer of human sound. Some scholars have explored how the density of industrial housing fostered both vulnerability and solidarity, arguing that proximity could amplify risk while also strengthening communal response. As you lie awake listening to layered breaths, that duality feels tangible. Gradually the street quiets further. Footsteps become infrequent. The lamp's hiss softens into background noise. The wind drops entirely, leaving the air still. Your body begins to release its tension. Muscles unclench one by one. The latch remains secure. The chair remains in place. The watchman continues his circuit beyond sight. You close your eyes and allow the room's warmth to envelop you again. The brief flicker of unease fades into the steady rhythm of breathing around you. In this industrial town, safety is not absolute. It is constructed nightly through simple locks, shared vigilance, and the quiet presence of neighbours on either side of thin walls. And as you finally drift back towards sleep, you recognise that rest here depends not only on exhaustion, but on trust. Trust in the latch, trust in the watchman, trust in the community bound together by brick smoke and necessity. The night holds fragile yet sufficient. There are nights when sleep refuses to come easily, not because of noise or cold or illness, but because your mind will not settle. You lie on your back, eyes open in the darkness, staring at a ceiling you can barely see. The straw beneath you rustles softly as you shift. The room is quiet, too quiet for the thoughts gathering in your chest. The week has been ordinary by industrial standards. Long hours, modest wages, supper stretched carefully. Yet tonight your thoughts drift towards something beyond tomorrow's whistle. You imagine a different room, a slightly larger one, Perhaps 2 rooms, a separate space where children might sleep without being pressed so close. It is a well-recognised feature of 19th century industrial Britain that many working families nurtured hopes of modest upward mobility, saving small sums in friendly societies or mutual aid clubs to cushion against illness or unemployment. You picture coins tucked carefully into a tin counted again and again by lamplight, each one a quiet step towards impossibility. The boy beside you sighs in his sleep. His breathing is steady now, fever long gone. You wonder what future he imagines, if he imagines one at all beyond the next shift. A small but revealing detail from the era comes to mind. Savings banks began to attract working-class depositors in growing numbers during the 19th century, encouraging thrift as both practical habit and moral virtue. The idea of gradual improvement, however modest, took root in many households. You imagine standing at a counter one day, placing a coin carefully into the clerk's hand. Some historians have debated how realistic such aspirations were for the majority of industrial labourers, questioning whether upward movement was attainable or largely symbolic. As you lie in the dim room, the answer feels suspended between hope and caution. You turn onto your side and listen to the faint hum of the town at rest. The street lamp beyond the curtain casts a pale glow. Somewhere in the distance, a late train rumbles past. Industry does not fully sleep even when you try to. Your thoughts wander further. Perhaps one day you might secure a position that pays slightly better. Perhaps the boy could learn a trade less punishing than factory work. Perhaps the girl could attend school longer before entering service. These possibilities flicker like the lamp's flame earlier in the evening. Small, uncertain, but present. Another widely acknowledged development of the period was the gradual expansion of education for working children, particularly after mid-century reforms. Literacy opened doors to clerical positions and skilled trades, though access remained uneven. You imagine the boy reading more confidently each year, letters transforming into opportunities. The straw mattress shifts again as you stretch your legs. The room remains the same, low ceiling, shared breath, familiar scents, yet your mind constructs alternate layouts. A small shelf for books, a separate bed for each child, a window that opens wider. Outside, the wind brushes lightly against brick. The sound is soft, almost soothing. It reminds you that change moves slowly like air across stone. Researchers continue to examine whether industrial towns fostered ambition alongside hardship, creating environments where new identities and aspirations could take shape. As you lie awake, you sense how proximity to opportunity, however limited, feeds imagination. You picture yourself walking past newly built model houses on the edge of town, their facades cleaner, their windows slightly larger. You wonder what it feels like to close a door behind you and know the space inside belongs solely to your family. The thought does not carry bitterness. It carries quiet determination. Gradually your breathing slows. The ceiling above fades into darkness. The straw beneath you feels less scratchy, more familiar. You realize that even as you dream of change, this room has sheltered you through smoke fever, cold and heat. It has held laughter and worry alike. Hope does not erase exhaustion. It softens it. It gives shape to the hours that follow labour. You close your eyes and allow your imagined future to blur gently at the edges. Tomorrow you will rise as usual. You will walk the same cobbled street, but tonight in the stillness between breaths you hold a small, steady vision of something slightly better. And that vision, fragile though it is, wraps around you like an extra blanket, warming the narrow space between what is and what might be. One afternoon, word travels down the street of something new being built at the edge of town. Not a mill, not a warehouse, houses, different ones. You hear it first from a neighbour leaning across her doorstep, voice lowered, but eager. Model dwellings, she says, as though the phrase itself carries promise. Before you stand rows of freshly constructed houses, their facades cleaner, their windows set a little wider apart. The air even feels lighter here, though the same sky hangs overhead. It's widely documented that during the later 19th century, certain industrialists and reformers sponsored improved housing projects for workers, believing that better living conditions would foster health, productivity, and moral behaviour. These experiments varied in quality and intent. Some were philanthropic, others were pragmatic. You step closer and study the neat lines of brick. A small yet intriguing detail from a few such developments is that they sometimes included shared courtyards, improved drainage, or designated washing facilities, features absent in older districts. You imagine water flowing more freely, waste managed more carefully, air circulating with fewer obstacles. You pause at the entrance of one dwelling left open for viewing. Inside, the layout surprises you. 2 rooms downstairs, perhaps even a small separate sleeping space above. The walls feel less damp to the touch. Light from the window reaches deeper into the interior. Some historians continue to discuss whether these model dwellings genuinely improved workers' quality of life, or whether they functioned partly as displays of benevolence that masked ongoing industrial exploitation. As you stand in the brighter room, the debate echoes faintly in your mind. Improvement and control can coexist. You imagine lying down here at night, so the straw mattress might rest on a slightly sturdier frame. The air might circulate more freely. Perhaps fewer bodies would share the same narrow space. The thought feels almost indulgent. Another broadly acknowledged shift of the era was the growing public awareness of sanitation and its link to health. Urban reform movements increasingly advocated for cleaner streets, improved sewage systems, and better ventilation. You sense that these new houses are part of that larger conversation. Yet as you step back outside, you also notice the distance from the factory gates. The walk would be longer, rent might be slightly higher. The trade-offs remain. A neighbour joins you, arms folded thoughtfully. She remarks on the brightness of the windows, the sturdiness of the doors. Her tone carries both admiration and scepticism. Could wages stretch far enough to reach such a place? Would the landlord's rules be stricter? Researchers have examined how housing reform intersected with social discipline, suggesting that improved dwellings sometimes came with expectations about cleanliness and conduct. As you glance at the neatly swept courtyard, you wonder whether order here is freely chosen or carefully supervised. The sun dips lower as you begin your walk back to the older street. The familiar smoke returns thicker now as evening cooking fires ignite. Your terrace house appears smaller after the glimpse of something different. Inside the room greets you with its usual scents and sounds. The straw mattress waits. The low ceiling feels closer than before. Yet there is comfort here too. This space has absorbed your routines. It has witnessed illness, laughter, ambition. You lie down and stare at the shadowed beams above. The image of the model dwelling lingers faintly in your mind, not as envy, more as possibility. Sleep approaches slowly. You sense how architecture shapes not only physical comfort, but imagination. The knowledge that alternatives exist, even if distant, alters the texture of your rest. Some scholars continue to explore how housing reform influenced broader working-class identity, asking whether improved dwellings fostered new standards of domestic life. As you drift towards sleep, you consider how even the idea of separate rooms might reshape expectations for privacy and rest. The night deepens. The familiar hum of your street settles around you. Outside, a lamplight flickers softly. You close your eyes and allow both images to coexist. The narrow terrace you know intimately and the brighter model house you glimpsed at the edge of town. Between them stretches the quiet territory of hope, and in that territory beneath smoke-marked beams and whispered ambitions you surrender once more to the steady embrace of sleep. You begin to notice that even when your eyes are closed, the town continues speaking, not in words but in vibration. The soundscape of industry does not simply fade at dusk. It thin shifts, rearranges itself into subtler layers. Tonight, as you lie on the straw mattress, you focus on listening. The room itself offers a quiet foundation. Slow breathing, an occasional turn of a body, the faint settling of cooling brick. But beyond these immediate sounds, something larger hums. It has been widely observed that industrialization reshaped not only work patterns, but also the auditory environment of urban life. Steam engines, railways, foundries, and mills introduced continuous mechanical noise into spaces that had once known more intermittent natural sounds. You feel that presence now as a low, distant thrum beneath the night. A train passes somewhere beyond the rooftops. You do not see it, but you sense its weight in the subtle tremor of floorboards. The rumble begins, softly swells, then recedes into the distance. Your body registers it almost before your mind does. A small but evocative detail from some early railway accounts suggests that people living near tracks sometimes measured time by the passage of particular trains, recognizing schedules through sound alone. You imagine identifying the late freight by its deeper resonance, the early passenger train by its sharper whistle. You turn onto your side and rest your ear briefly against the thin pillow. The world sounds different from this angle. The hum of distant machinery blends with the closer tick of cooling metal somewhere in the neighborhood. Perhaps a blacksmith's tools contracting in the chill. Perhaps a cart left outside to settle. Some historians continue to explore how prolonged exposure to industrial noise affected sleep quality and stress levels, though evidence from the period is often indirect. Diaries mention difficulty resting. Reformers wrote of restless districts. Yet many workers likely adapted weaving mechanical sound into the background of nightly rest. As you lie here, you sense how the hum has become almost familiar, like the distant rush of a river. The street lamp outside hisses faintly, its steady flame adding a gentle sibilance to the mix. From a neighbouring house comes the soft murmur of a lullaby nearly indistinguishable from the night air. Your body begins to synchronise with this layered environment. The sharpness of each sound dulls slightly as fatigue draws you inward. The train's echo no longer startles. The faint clang from a yard becomes part of the rhythm. Another well-recognised development of the 19th century was the acceleration of transportation networks, which tightened connections between cities and countryside. With that acceleration came constant motion, and with motion came sound. Even at rest, towns remained connected to distant places through rails and steam. You imagine what silence must have felt like before all this. A silence defined by wind, animal calls, and human voices alone. Now even in darkness, the industrial pulse continues subtle but persistent. Some researchers have suggested that this new acoustic environment altered people's perception of time itself, compressing distances and intensifying awareness of movement. As you drift closer to sleep, you sense how the hum beneath you ties your small room to larger systems of production and travel. The boy shifts beside you, murmuring something unintelligible. Perhaps his dreams replay the rhythm of machinery. Perhaps they wander elsewhere entirely. You breathe in, slowly matching the pace of the distant hum. In and out. The straw beneath you crackles softly, a more organic counterpoint to iron and steam. Outside, a late cart rolls past, wheels grinding briefly against stone. A dog barks once, then twice before settling. The night is not empty. It is textured. Gradually the sounds blend into a single low backdrop. Your mind stops isolating them. They become part of the air, as inseparable as the faint scent of coal that lingers in the room. Sleep approaches not in silence, but in harmony with the industry's quiet echo. You realise that for those raised in such towns, the absence of this hum might feel unsettling, like a missing heartbeat. You allow the layered soundscape to cradle you rather than disturb you. The train in the distance becomes a lullaby. The hiss of the lamp turns into steady white noise. The faint tick of cooling metal marks time gently, and as you drift fully into rest, you carry with you the understanding that industrial Britain does not switch off at night, softens, it hums, it breathes, it... Beneath smoke-marked beams and thin brick walls, your sleep aligns itself with that steady pulse, finding rhythm, not in fluence, but in the enduring murmur of a town built on iron and steam. As night settles once more, you begin to notice the small rituals that gently guide everyone towards sleep. They are not written down anywhere, no bell signals their start, yet they unfold with quiet consistency. The boy washes his face in a chipped basin, splashing water that has cooled since evening. He gasps at the chill, then grins faintly. The mother smooths his hair with damp fingers, pressing it flat in a gesture that feels both practical and affectionate. The father clears his throat and reaches for a small worn book kept carefully on a shelf. It's commonly understood that despite long working hours, many families preserved simple bedtime customs, from shared prayers to short readings aloud. These practices offered continuity in lives otherwise shaped by relentless schedules. You sit closer and listen as the father reads a few lines in a steady, measured tone. His voice is not polished, but it is warm. A modest yet touching detail from certain working-class households reveals that lullabies passed down orally often carried fragments of older rural traditions lingering, melodies from villages left behind. You hear the mother hum one now, barely above a whisper. The tune feels older than the street itself. The lamp flickers softly as the reading ends. The book is closed with care and returned to its place. A brief silence follows, not empty but reflective. The father bows his head. The children imitate him some more solemnly than others. A short prayer is spoken. Some scholars have explored whether such rituals strengthened family cohesion in cramped urban settings, creating emotional space where physical space was limited. As you observe the bowed heads and quiet murmurs, you sense how these moments anchor the day. The blanket is drawn back. The straw mattress rustles as bodies settle into familiar positions. The cradle receives one final gentle push. The lamp is lowered slowly, its flame shrinking until the room rests in ember glow. Outside the street continues its faint murmur, a distant laugh, the soft scrape of a door closing. Yet inside a hush forms that feels deliberate. Another widely recognized shift during the 19th century was the gradual standardization of daily routines shaped by industrial schedules. Bedtime, once more fluid in agrarian life, became more tightly aligned with factory hours. Even so, within that structure, families carved out small spaces for personal tradition. You lie down and feel the gentle press of another shoulder against yours. A child's hand seeks reassurance in the dark, you offer it without thinking. Some historians continue to consider how these domestic rituals functioned as subtle resistance to the impersonal forces of industrial capitalism, preserving identity within systems that demanded uniformity. Whether resistance or simply habit, the effect is calming. You close your eyes and focus on the fading warmth of the hearth. The lullaby's final note still lingers faintly in your mind. The prayer's cadence echoes softly, blending with the distant hum of the town. In this narrow room beneath smoke-stained beams, bedtime is not merely collapse from exhaustion. It is a gentle sequence of gestures: washing, reading, humming, whispering. A small, almost playful observation from social commentators of the era noted that children sometimes prolonged bedtime by asking for repeated stories or extra verses of songs, testing the patience of weary parents. You smile faintly at the thought, imagining a quiet plea for one more line. Gradually breathing steadies across the room. The mother's hand rests lightly on the edge of the bed. The father shifts once, then stills. The boy's sigh fades into rhythm. The street lamp outside casts a thin band of light across the floor, but inside darkness feels protective rather than oppressive. You sense how these nightly customs weave continuity through uncertainty. Factories may change shifts, wages may rise or fall, seasons may shift from frost to heat. Yet the lullaby remains. The prayer remains. As sleep approaches, you allow the final traces of voice and melody to guide you inward. The straw beneath you feels less scratchy now, softened by familiarity. The air carries faint smoke but also warmth, and in this small industrial home you drift into rest, wrapped not only in blankets but in ritual. There are mornings when the first task of the day begins not at the factory gate but beside a basin of water. You wake to the faint splash and scrape of cloth against skin. The mother is already at work again, sleeves rolled, arms pale in the early light. Cleanliness here is not a matter of luxury, it is a negotiation. Water must be fetched or drawn carefully. Soap must be stretched. Time must be found between shifts and chores. Yet despite these limits, there is a steady effort to maintain order within the small room. It's well recorded that throughout the 19th century, ideas about respectability and hygiene gained increasing prominence among working families influenced by religious teaching, social reform, and emerging medical thought. Clean collars and scrubbed faces signaled more than vanity. They suggested discipline and dignity. You sit up and watch as the children take turns at the basin. The water is not fresh for each of them. It cannot be. Still each face is washed with care. Hair is combed with fingers when a proper comb cannot be found. The scent of soap rises briefly sharp and clean, cutting through the lingering coal smoke. A small yet telling detail from some industrial households is that washing day became a significant weekly ritual, often requiring hours of boiling, scrubbing, wringing, and hanging. Lines of damp clothing would stretch across courtyards and narrow streets, transforming the landscape into a fluttering display of labour. You imagine shirts and sheets swaying in uncertain sunlight, soot threatening to settle before they dry. The father inspects his collar before dressing. A faint stain remains near the edge, but it's faint enough. He nods satisfied. His boots are wiped down with a damp rag. Even leather must appear presentable when possible. Some historians continue to explore how notions of cleanliness intersected with class perception during the industrial age, as reformers often equated physical order with moral worth. Yet for families like this one, washing is less about impressing outsiders and more about preserving self-respect within tight quarters. You reach for your own shirt and feel the stiffness where it has dried near the hearth. It carries the scent of smoke no matter how thoroughly it has been rinsed. That smell is almost unavoidable in a coal-fired town. Outside, you hear a neighbour beating a rug against a railing. The thud echoes rhythmically. Dust rises briefly visible in morning light before dispersing. Across the street, a woman empties a bucket carefully into the gutter, mindful of where the water flows. Another widely acknowledged development of the 19th century was the gradual improvement of urban sanitation systems, though progress moved unevenly across districts. In older streets, waste disposal remained imperfect and families compensated as best they could. You sense that balance now in the careful pouring of water and the scrubbing of floors. The floorboards beneath your feet are cool as you step down. A cloth passes over them in steady strokes, lifting yesterday's dust. The room feels subtly transformed after such attention. Not larger, not brighter, but fresher. A curious observation from certain reform campaigns reveals that some advocates promoted whitewashed walls in working homes to reflect more light and signal cleanliness. You glance at your own smoke-darkened ceiling and imagine how different it might look in pale lime. The boy buttons his shirt carefully, fingers fumbling slightly. He glances at the door as though eager to step outside and test the day. You see how grooming and preparation serve as small acts of readiness. You tie your own laces and feel the tightness around your ankles. The room smells faintly of damp cloth and soap. The scent is fleeting but welcome. Sleep, you realise, is influenced not only by bedding and noise, but by the condition in which you lie down. Fresh sheets, when possible, carry a different comfort than those worn thin by neglect. Even a quick wash before bed can soften the day's residue. As the morning unfolds and the whistle approaches, the family stands a little straighter. Faces are clean, hair is smoothed, clothes, though patched, are tidy. In this narrow industrial home, hygiene becomes both shield and statement, a declaration that even amid smoke and soot care persists. When night returns and you lower yourself onto the straw mattress once more, you will carry with you the faint scent of soap and the knowledge that hands have worked quietly to maintain dignity within constraint. And that quiet care repeated day after day shapes not only how you are seen by others, but how you feel when you close your eyes and surrender to rest. There are evenings when your body feels heavier than usual, as though the day has settled not only into your muscles, but into your bones. You lie down and expect sleep to claim you instantly, yet fatigue can be a complicated thing. It weighs you down and keeps you awake at the same time. Today the work was relentless. The machines did not falter. The overseer's pace did not soften. Your hands moved in repetition until sensation blurred. When the whistle finally released you, your limbs felt borrowed rather than owned. It is widely acknowledged that industrial labour in the 19th century often demanded long hours of physically taxing work, sometimes stretching beyond 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Fatigue was not an exception. It was a condition woven into ordinary life. You feel that truth now in the ache behind your knees and the dull throb at the base of your skull. You close your eyes and attempt to rest, but your mind replays the rhythm of the machinery, the steady clatter, the turning belts, the hiss of steam. Your body flinches slightly as though anticipating another command. A small yet unsettling detail from factory life lingers in your thoughts. Accidents were not rare, especially in environments where exhaustion dulled reaction times. A hand caught in gears, a misstep on a slick floor. The knowledge of such risks hovered constantly in the background. You imagine how many nights were haunted by the memory of a near miss. Some historians continue to debate whether employers underestimated the toll of fatigue or simply accepted it as inevitable within competitive markets. Records speak of fines for lateness, of strict discipline, of limited allowances for rest. Yet they also reveal gradual reform movements seeking shorter hours. As you lie awake, the tension between productivity and human limits feels immediate. Your shoulder presses into the straw mattress. It offers no luxury, but it does offer stillness. You shift carefully, aware of the child sleeping beside you. The room is quiet, yet your heart beats a little faster than usual. Outside, a train rumbles faintly. The sound merges with the echo of machinery still humming in your ears. You wonder whether your dreams will replay the day's labour or drift elsewhere entirely. Another widely recognised consequence of prolonged industrial work was the strain placed on both body and mind. Reports from the era mention workers falling asleep during brief pauses or struggling to maintain focus during extended shifts. You feel that edge now, the thin line between exhaustion and restlessness. You take a slow breath, then another. Gradually the tension in your jaw eases, the ache in your legs softens from sharp to dull. A neighbour coughs through the wall, a reminder that you are not alone in this fatigue. Entire streets carry similar weariness. Entire rows of houses cradle bodies worn thin by repetition. Researchers have examined how chronic tiredness may have shaped social life, limiting evening activities and compressing leisure into narrow windows. As you recall Saturday's brief laughter, you sense how precious such moments become when energy is scarce. You turn onto your other side. The straw crackles softly. The blanket shifts against your chin. The room smells faintly of coal and clean cloth. Familiar scents ground you. Gradually the images of moving belts and spinning wheels lose their sharpness. They blur at the edges, transforming from mechanical commands into distant shapes. Sleep approaches unevenly at first. You drift, then surface briefly, then drift again. Your body seems to negotiate its own recovery. The father shifts once in his sleep, muttering something unintelligible. The mother's breathing remains steady. The boy sighs and curls closer to the warmth beside him. In this industrial town, fatigue is both burden and guarantee. It ensures that when sleep finally arrives, it is deep, but it also tests the limits of endurance. You let your muscles release one by one. Your hands unclench, your shoulders sink into the thin mattress. The echo of machinery fades further, replaced by the softer hum of distant night sounds. And at last, exhaustion wins its quiet victory. Your breathing aligns with the others in the room. The day's strain dissolves into the steady rhythm of rest. Beneath smoke-marked beams and narrow walls, you surrender fully, knowing that tomorrow will demand the same effort, but trusting that for these few hours your body may rebuild itself in the darkness. There was a time not so long ago when night in this town meant near total darkness beyond the glow of hearth and candle. Now you notice how the evenings stretch further than they once did. Gaslight has begun to alter the character of the streets and with it the shape of your rest. You step outside after supper and find the lane brighter than it would have been a decade earlier. Lamps stand at measured intervals, their glass enclosures humming softly as flames burn within. Shadows still exist, but they retreat more quickly. Faces are easier to recognize. Signs above small shops remain visible longer. It's well established that the expansion of municipal gas lighting during the 19th century transformed urban life in Britain, extending commercial and social activity into hours once claimed by darkness. You feel the subtle shift in your own habits. The urge to retreat indoors immediately after sunset is less urgent when the street glows amber. A small yet fascinating detail from early gaslight systems is that maintenance crews regularly inspected pipes and fittings to prevent leaks, as escaping gas could pose serious danger. The faint smell that sometimes drifted along certain streets was a reminder that progress carried risk. You inhale cautiously as you walk, catching only the usual scent of coal and damp stone to night. You notice more movement in the evenings now. A cobbler keeps his door open an extra hour. A seamstress finishes a garment by brighter light. Groups linger longer at corners, conversation weaving through illuminated air. Some historians continue to examine whether artificial lighting significantly delayed bedtime for working families, or whether physical exhaustion still dictated early rest despite brighter streets. As you observe neighbours chatting beneath lamps, you sense that the answer depends on circumstance. Opportunity tempts. Fatigue insists. Inside your home, the effect is more subtle. Light from the street filters faintly through the curtain, blending with the lamp's glow. The room feels slightly less isolated from the outside world. You can see outlines more clearly. Movements are less obscured. The boy sits near the window longer than usual, tracing shapes in the condensation with his fingertip. The father lingers over a newspaper, squinting less than before. The mother finishes a seam without rushing against fading light. Another widely acknowledged outcome of improved illumination was the rise of evening educational and social gatherings, from lectures to mutual improvement societies. Though not everyone attended, the possibility existed. You imagine stepping into a hall lit brightly, listening to a speaker discuss reform or invention. Yet when it is finally time to lower the lamp, you sense how light and darkness still negotiate their boundaries. The street outside remains aglow, but inside you prefer shadow for sleep. The lamp is turned down carefully. The flame shrinks and vanishes. You lie on the straw mattress and notice how the thin band of gaslight near the window remains a faint reminder that the town continues glowing beyond your walls. It is different from moonlight, more deliberate, more constant. A curious observation from some early critics of gaslight was that it eroded the natural rhythm of day and night, encouraging overwork and diminishing the restorative quality of darkness. Others praised it as a triumph of modern ingenuity. As you close your eyes, you sense both perspectives hovering quietly. The room settles. The father shifts once, then stills. The mother's breathing deepens. The boy curls toward warmth. Outside, the lamp hums steadily. A carriage passes without vanishing into complete shadow. The watchman's figure is clearer than before as he patrols. Sleep arrives as it always does, shaped by fatigue more than illumination. Yet you cannot ignore the subtle transformation. Night no longer belongs entirely to darkness. It is shared with flame contained in glass, with pipes running unseen beneath cobbles, with progress flickering steadily above doorways. And as you drift inward, the faint glow near the window becomes a gentle companion rather than intrusion. The industrial age continues to brighten the streets, but within your small room you still surrender to shadow when you choose. Light may stretch the evening, but it does not conquer the need for rest. So you let your eyelids close, allowing both ember and gas flame to fade from your awareness, trusting that even in an era determined to illuminate every corner, sleep will still find you in the dark. There are nights when the town does not soften at all. Instead of the usual easing into hush, a tension hums beneath the surface, sharper than the distant thrum of machinery. You sense it before you understand it. Voices gather at the end of the street, not in laughter, but in low, urgent clusters. Today the factory floor felt different. Work slowed. Conversations lingered near the looms and benches. A rumour moved from one worker to the next, carried quietly but persistently. Wages may be cut, hours may increase, or perhaps the opposite. The details blur, but the unease remains. It is a firmly grounded historical reality that industrial Britain saw frequent strikes, protests, and labour's disputes as workers sought fairer wages and safer conditions. These events did not erupt constantly, but when they did, they rippled through entire neighbourhoods. Tonight you feel the ripple. Outside, a group of men stands beneath the gaslight voices, measured but intense. Caps are removed and replaced. Hands gesture sharply. You linger near the doorway, listening without appearing to stare. The boy stands slightly behind you, eyes wide, absorbing every word. A small yet revealing detail from certain labour movements is that meetings were sometimes held in the open air or in public houses, spreading information through word of mouth when printed notices were scarce or censored. You imagine a folded leaflet passing discreetly from palm to palm. The mother's expression tightens slightly. She understands what unrest can mean. Missed wages, uncertain rent, the fragile arithmetic of survival thrown into question. Yet she also understands the weight of endurance without change. Some historians continue to debate whether early industrial strikes were primarily defensive responses to hardship or proactive efforts to reshape the labour system entirely. As you watch the gathering crowd, you sense elements of both urgency and aspiration. The watchman's presence feels more symbolic than controlling tonight. He passes slowly, eyes alert, stuff striking stone with a sharper echo than usual. The lamplight casts elongated shadows of raised arms against brick walls. Inside the house, sleep feels distant. The straw mattress awaits, but your mind remains tethered to the street. You sit on the edge of the bed, listening to the cadence of voices outside. They rise, then fall, then rise again. A broadly recognised feature of industrial protest was the strong role of community solidarity. Women and children often participated, indirectly supporting strikers through shared food or encouragement. You imagine pots simmering in neighbouring homes, stretched to feed those who might not work tomorrow. The boy whispers a question you cannot fully hear. The father answers quietly, choosing words with care. There is no shouting inside this room, only measured explanation. Eventually the crowd begins to disperse. Footsteps retreat along the cobbles. The murmur thins to scattered conversation. The street returns gradually to its usual pattern, yet the tension lingers in your chest. You lie down and stare at the ceiling, barely visible in dim light. The gas lamp's glow filters faintly through the curtain. Your thoughts turn toward tomorrow. Will the whistle sound as usual? Will the gates open? Or will silence mark the start of something new? A curious observation from some industrial towns reveals that during prolonged strikes, families sometimes adjusted their sleep patterns, staying up later to attend meetings, or rising earlier to discuss plans. Rest itself could be reshaped by collective action. You close your eyes and attempt to slow your breathing. The room's familiar scents surround you. Smoke, soap, damp brick. The father shifts beside you, exhaling slowly. The mother's hand rests lightly on the mattress edge. Some scholars have explored how moments of unrest strengthened communal identity, forging bonds that extended beyond workplace grievances. As you replay the evening's voices in your mind, you sense how shared uncertainty can unite as well as unsettle. Gradually, the street quiets entirely. The watchman's steps fade into the distance. The gas lamp hums steadily, indifferent to human dispute. Sleep does not arrive easily tonight. It hovers at the edges, hesitant. But fatigue remains a powerful force. Even anxiety cannot fully resist it. You let your muscles relax one by one. The straw mattress cradles you imperfectly but reliably. The boy's breathing steadies. The father's chest rises and falls in even rhythm. Outside, the town waits. Change may come tomorrow, or it may not. For now, beneath smoke-marked beams and whispered uncertainty, you drift into a restless sleep shaped not by machinery alone, but by the collective murmur of voices daring to question it. There are nights when, despite the smoke, the noise, the narrowness of walls, you become aware of something surprisingly tender. Not grand reform, not sweeping change, just small comforts almost easy to overlook. You lie on your side and notice that the pillow beneath your head feels slightly different tonight. The ticking is still thin, the stuffing still uneven, yet there is a softness at one corner. The mother mentioned earlier that she had added a handful of feathers saved from market scraps. It is not a full feather pillow, not the sort found in wealthier homes, but it is an improvement, subtle, almost secret. It's well documented that working families often invested in small household upgrades when possible, prioritizing items that promised comfort or durability. A sturdier bed frame, a thicker blanket, a better quality pair of boots. These purchases rarely transformed life entirely, but they eased its edges. You press your cheek into the feathered corner and feel the faint give beneath you. A small yet charming detail from certain industrial households reveals that treasured objects such as a decorative teacup or a framed print were sometimes displayed prominently despite cramped conditions. These items carried meaning beyond their cost. They signaled taste aspiration memory. You glance toward a tiny picture tacked carefully to the wall, its edges curling slightly. It might depict a pastoral scene far removed from soot and steam. Outside, the street lamp glows steadily. The hum of distant machinery remains faint but constant. Yet inside this room you focus on the immediate sensations. The smoother patch of pillow, the slightly thicker blanket folded at the foot of the bed, brought out only on colder nights. Some historians continue to examine how material culture shaped working class identity during the Industrial Age, suggesting that even modest possessions contributed to a sense of stability and self-definition. As you lie there, you feel how these small comforts anchor you. The boy clutches a small object in his hand as he sleeps. Carved wooden whistle, perhaps traded for pennies at market. It rests against his chest like a talisman. The father's boots, recently resoled, sit near the door with quiet pride. Another widely acknowledged development of the period was the increasing availability of inexpensive printed materials, from chapbooks to serialized stories. You imagine borrowing a pamphlet and reading it slowly by lamplight, savouring each page before returning it. Even words can be comfort. You shift slightly and notice that the straw mattress, though still uneven, has been shaken more thoroughly tonight. The lumps are less pronounced. Care has been taken. A curious observation from some social surveys reveals that families often arrange furniture carefully to create the illusion of greater space-angling chairs or trunks to carve out small private corners. You picture the trunk near the wall, turned just so creating a narrow nook where someone might sit alone for a moment. Sleep approaches gently, not with the heavy collapse of exhaustion alone, but with a softer awareness of gratitude. The feathered pillow corner, the clean collar folded on the chair, the mended blankets stitched with patient hands. Researchers have suggested that in environments of scarcity, small improvements could carry disproportionate emotional weight. A single new object might symbolize progress, resilience, or hope. As you sink slightly deeper into the pillow, you sense how even modest enhancements reshape your perception of rest. The room remains the same size, the walls remain thin, the air still holds faint coal smoke, yet tonight you feel a touch more at ease. Outside, a carriage rolls past its wheels, less startling than before. The lamplight casts a gentle stripe across the floorboards. The watchman's steps echo faintly at the corner. You close your eyes and allow these familiar sounds to blend with the quiet satisfaction of small gains. The Industrial Age has brought compression and clatter, but within that intensity, families carve out tiny islands of comfort. Your breathing slows. The feathered corner cradles your cheek. The straw beneath you seems less intrusive. The boy's wooden whistle rests safely in his grasp. And in this narrow terrace room, beneath smoke-marked beams and steady gaslight, you discover that rest is not only about survival, it is also about these modest luxuries gathered slowly over time that soften the hardness of industrial nights. You drift into sleep, holding that awareness close, knowing that while grand transformations may unfold beyond your street, it is often the smallest comforts that shape how deeply you rest. You wake before the whistle this time, not from noise or discomfort, but from a quiet awareness that you have come to know this room intimately. The ceiling beams, darkened by years of smoke, feel almost familiar enough to trace with your eyes, even in dim light. The straw mattress beneath you no longer surprises your hips with its unevenness. Your body has learned its landscape. Outside, dawn approaches slowly. The sky beyond the curtain is a muted grey, softer than the heavy smoke that will soon rise to meet it. For a few suspended moments, the town rests in a fragile balance between silence and industry. It has been firmly established that the Industrial Age reshaped daily life in Britain, not only through technology and wages, but through the intimate geography of sleep. Terraced houses multiplied, rooms filled, time became regulated by whistles and clocks, rather than by sun and season. You have felt each of those changes through your own imagined bones. Beside you, the boy breathes steadily, his small hand still loosely curled, as though holding on to last night's dreams. The father stirs, faintly accustomed to rising before command. The mother's breathing remains slow and even, her work waiting patiently for her to begin again. A small yet poignant detail from accounts of 19th century working life reveals that many people mark the passage of years not by grand events, but by the gradual wear of objects. A mattress replaced, a blanket patched again, a window frame repainted. Time registered itself quietly in the household. You glance toward the trunk in the corner, its surface scratched by countless hands, and sense how endurance leaves marks. Some historians continue to reflect on whether industrial urban living ultimately improved material conditions for the majority, or entrenched cycles of hardship that required generations to ease. The evidence remains layered and complex. What feels undeniable lying here is the resilience that filled these narrow rooms night after night. The first faint sound of a distant train reaches your ears, not yet the whistle, just the low rumble of motion beginning elsewhere. The town inhales. You sit up slowly and feel the cool air brush your face. The room smells faintly of soap from yesterday's washing, and of smoke that never entirely disappears. It is not a romantic scent, it is honest. Over these nights you have known heat pressing down from slate roofs and frost creeping across window panes. You have felt anxiety during unrest and hope during quiet ambition. You have shared warmth with family and space with lodgers. You have listened to lamplighters, watchmen trains, and distant arguments. Another broadly acknowledged transformation of the period was the gradual emergence of public debates about housing, reform labour, rights, sanitation, and education. Those debates unfolded in halls and newspapers, but their consequences landed here in rooms like this one, where bodies lay down each night to recover. You place your feet on the cool floorboards and stand. The straw mattress rustles behind you. The father sits up as well, nodding faintly in acknowledgement of the coming day. The boy turns over, squeezing his eyes tighter against the approaching morning. Outside the sky lightens by degrees. Chimneys will soon release their daily exhale. The whistle will follow. Yet before that sharp command splits the air, you linger in this softer space. The narrow room, imperfect and crowded, has been more than shelter. It has been witness to endurance. Sleep in industrial Britain was rarely luxurious. It was communal, negotiated, sometimes uneasy. It was shaped by coal smoke, by factory bells, by thin walls and thinner wages. And yet within those constraints, ordinary people crafted routines, bacheliers, rituals and comforts that made rest possible. You glance once more around the room. The patched blanket folded at the bed's edge, the small picture on the wall, the boots lined carefully by the door. Each object speaks quietly of adaptation. The distant rumble grows louder. A whistle answers from across town. The day begins again. You draw a steady breath and let it out slowly. The industrial age has not been gentle, but beneath its iron pulse you have discovered something steady and human. Now as the first light of morning touches the edge of the curtain, allow your own breath to slow, let the distant rumble fade into the background. Imagine the room settling once more into quiet. The fire banked low, the lamp dimmed, the street lamp humming softly beyond thin glass. Feel the straw beneath you, not as discomfort but as grounding. Feel the warmth of a shared presence, even if only in memory. The whistle will sound, but not yet. For this moment you are suspended in calm. So let your shoulders soften. Let your thoughts loosen their grip on schedules and poke. Picture the narrow terrace under a pale dawn, steady and resilient. And as you drift gently away from the hum of iron and steam, carry with you the quiet truth that even in the hardest of ages ordinary people found ways to rest, to hope and to endure. Sleep now beneath that smoky sky.
Sweet dream reigns.